Get all your so hello. All right, hey guys, what's up? We are live faster than I thought, and this is the movie discussion pocket dimension where time does not exist. And the only thing that matters is film. With I'm Cole, and that is Jay, and we are back from our unplanned summer hiatus. We never meant to take a summer break. It just sort of happened. It's mostly on me because for most of July I wound up being back at my parents' place, and I assured people at the time, "Oh, that's okay. I can still do the show from here. It's not going to mess up my routine." But of course, I totally did mess it up. And even though I've been back here for quite a few weeks now, in coming back, I think it was just sort of the lull of the summer, maybe the heat. It's been a really hot summer here, which I'm probably one of the hottest summers of my adult life, at least. And I don't know, I'm not a person that deals with the heat well. And I've just found in the last few weeks to a month, if not more, like I just haven't been able to concentrate and enjoy movies the way I normally do. Like my movie watching has really dropped. And a few times there were times where I attempted to watch movies and stopped them, not because the movie was bad, but because I just couldn't focus. I think some of it is the heat. I get uncomfortable. When I'm uncomfortable, I sort of fidget, move around, and I'm not the type of person that's good at watching a movie. I have to keep, pausing it or coming back to it. I like to just sort of let it flow, and I wasn't doing that. So I mean, I was doing other things, and video games and books and comics and so forth. But movies, I was having a lot of trouble with. So even like last week when I was like, enough is enough. We're gonna get back and get our show going again. I had to like really put the screws to myself just to concentrate. And I don't know why, because I mean, just like we do the show because I love movies, but I don't know. I think maybe everybody gets in a mood like that every once in a while. They're just not good at focusing or concentrating. And I was definitely going through that. So I'm trying to think what I've even watched through the summer. You watched anything, even if it's something old that you revisited? Anything in your?
I saw Ant-Man and Wasp. I don't think we've talked about that yet.
Okay, I enjoyed that. I thought that was better than the first Ant-Man.
Mm-hmm.
I liked what they did with Ghost. Ghost was sort of an interesting villain, more of an Iron Man villain than Ant-Man villain, but they made good use of Ghost, turned it into a female and sort of a sympathetic, and I don't mind any of that. I actually added some depth because Ghost, from what I know, I've only seen him pop up here and there, but from his early appearances when he was in the original iteration of the male or whatever like that, he was still somewhat of a sympathetic villain because he wasn't driven by greed or malice exactly. Like usually his main thing was sort of like corporate sabotage and stuff, and that's what he usually did. He tried to like bring down big companies and destroy tech and steal tech and that kind of stuff. And they did basically work that into the plot with this different Ghost, who they added a whole backstory about as this girl, and I liked it quite a bit. And actually, I think Ghost lends itself better to sort of a female form than male. Really, I think it looked kind of cool. So I thought that was neat. That perked my ears up right away the first time I saw the first trailer, to see that they were bringing Ghost into it and that Ghost would be a female. I thought that was pretty cool, and I liked how they did it.
Yeah, Ghost. So Ghost was male in the comic books?
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't realize that. I thought I remembered that villain, but I must not be remembering it correctly.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this is basically everything else is basically right. Like the power set, like has a suit that allows them to turn invisible, do stealth stuff, and to phase through stuff. That's all. How it was. It just was a male instead of a female. But again, he was still even though he would sometimes show up on like bad guy teams, the Thunderbolts and stuff like that. Like he wasn't a good guy or a bad guy. He was kind of like an in between type guy. Like he was breaking the law and he was a criminal, but he wasn't like a supervillain, the way some of these other people were. And he didn't go out of his way to like hurt people or anything like that. His usual shtick, like I said, was like corporate sabotage and stuff, and was an Iron Man villain. Really, like would get hired by various people to like cause trouble for Stark Industries and stuff like that. But maybe, I mean, the character's been around, I think, since the mid-'80s, so it's possible at some point had some interactions with Ant-Man, one of the Ant-Mans. Of course, the big difference in this movie telling is the idea that Hank Pym, the original Ant-Man, is now much older and basically retired, and that when he was Ant-Man, it was in the 80s, and it was hidden from the public, and that him and his wife, Janet Van Dyne, was the Wasp, and they were both active, but not really as superheroes, but they did do some stuff. I mean, they stopped like some sort of Russian rocket and stuff, and that's how she wound up disappearing. So that's the main difference here. Is instead of Hank Pym being basically in the same age range and one of the active heroes in the Marvel U. He's inactive, or at least in that capacity. Obviously, he's still a guru or mentor or whatever you want to call him. And Scott Lang is the only publicly known Ant-Man, I guess. Which I'm fine with. Scott Lang I preferred as Ant-Man. I thought he was the more interesting Ant-Man. But it is kind of too bad that they relegated Hank Pym to old man on the sideline status, because Hank Pym wears many hats in the Marvel U in the comic books. I mean, he was Ant-Man, he was Giant Man, he was Yellow Jacket, he was Goliath. Sometimes he was more of a supporting character. He went through a period with the West Coast Avengers where he was just called Dr. Pym, where he was just sort of like their tech guy and stuff. And currently, if anybody's wondering, he's merged with Ultron. That's what his old creation Ultron has actually taken over his body and so now they are kind of one, and they're actually deeply embroiled in the whole I guess to tie it in sort of with the movies. There's another Infinity Gems thing going on right now in the comics, and he's one of the ones that managed to steal one of them. Got into a pretty cool fight with the Silver Surfer and Adam Warlock. But anyway, yeah, so like I said, it's a little too bad that Hank Pym has been relegated to that. But again, I don't mind it too much. It's a fun movie. I'll say what my main complaint is this new Wasp. I don't dislike her. She's fine. I just feel like they're really going out of their way to make it seem like she's the cool hero badass and Scott's kind of just like a bumbling idiot. And I kind of don't like that.
Well, I kind of feel like that's why they cast whatever his name is as Ant-Man.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the comedic guy. Paul Rudd.
Paul Rudd, that's right. And I think that's a fine casting choice. He actually proves that he can do it.
Yeah.
You know, and he worked out some. He's in fairly good shape and can do a few stunts and stuff. So that's good to see. And he's not too heavy on the comedic stuff, which is fine. But yeah, in this movie more so even than the first one, it's like, yep, she's the competent hero, and he's just kind of an idiot. And she's probably wondering why the Avengers even bothered with him, and and not her and stuff. But anyway, I don't know. She's okay. She's kind of a sourpuss.
Yeah.
She's kind of a frowning all the time, but it's not that bad. But yeah, it was fun. I liked seeing them play off against Ghost. They managed to bring in some other characters. Like as soon as I saw Lawrence Fishburne, I was like, he's Black Goliath, and he is.
Yeah, I don't know why they have to cast such known actors in these films, but
now isn't it kind of annoying when they cross? I mean, when they go back and forth. I mean, I guess maybe not to non-comic people, but it's weird that he in the DC universe he's Perry White. At the Superman's boss, the guy who runs the guy that runs the Daily Planet. He's Perry White in that, and now he's Bill Foster in Marvel. Now, obviously, Bill Foster is not really as well known as Perry White, but still, I mean, he's prominent characters in both universes, which I kind of don't like. I mean, I guess it's no big deal. He's an actor. You play parts, stuff like that, but I don't know. I kind of feel like if you're in the DC universe movies, you shouldn't be in the Marvel movies and vice versa.
Sure.
I think there's enough actors, like you said, there's enough actors and enough parts to go around that we don't need to see that. Because, I like Lawrence Fishburne. I like him in lots of stuff, but is it really necessary?
Yeah, I mean, seeing like Lawrence Fishburne in there, it kind of takes me out of it a little bit,
I totally agree with that.
I'm so used to him in other roles. And same with, Michael Douglas and hell, the whole film's full of, known actors.
Yeah, I think Marvel's letting its success go to its head a little too much with that.
I mean, just imagine how much they spend just on actors, like just getting these people.
I mean, Michelle Pfeiffer's in the movie for about 10 minutes of screen time. How much do you think they paid her? I bet you they paid her a fucking ton. But
maybe not.
And is it really important that she needed to be there?
No, not at all.
They really wanted to push the old but still hot.
Yeah.
It's really important that we know that even though she's older, she's still hot. I don't know. But I mean, I like the movie, and I'm not going to give away the ending. But anybody who watched Infinity War, I went into this one saying, when does this take place? How's this supposed to work? The ending lets you know how it fits in and how it works. And also shows that Ant-Man must have a pretty important role to play going forward, given the way things have ended otherwise. So that's kind of neat too, and also helps make up for the fact that he wasn't in an Infinity War, just like Hawkeye wasn't in Infinity War, which I thought was more weird. Ant-Man,
Why was Hawkeye not in the movie?
I have no idea. That just seems odd. I mean, he was one of the founding Avengers. He's not a guy with his own movie.
I mean,
why wasn't he there?
They sign these guys like to contracts with, I'm sure all that's attached. Like, you can only do these movies, you know, like if you have another project, you have to stop and do this. So, I mean, it must have been something that he wasn't required to do.
I guess so. Hope.
What do you think that they sign them to multiple movies just out of the gate with these things?
I don't know if it was that way to start, but they got to a point where, you know, they were building up the universe and stuff. Where that must have become the standard, right? People talk all the time about Chris Evans's contract, and I really don't want him to go anywhere. I think he's great in the role, and I like. And it's one of the few times where, like, as he gets older, it gets better, kind of type thing.
Yeah, it's the he has the beard now, right?
Yeah, that too. I mean, it's not like you usually see Cap in a beard, but I mean,
kind of threw me off. I think they even made a joke about it in Infinity War.
Well, he's a fugitive, so it makes sense that he'd have a beard.
Thor was like, "Oh, you copy my beard now," or something like that. But you know, Thor didn't have a beard when the first, you know, his first movie came out either. So
didn't he?
I didn't think he did.
He did. Yeah, he did.
Was it?
He had a beard from the beginning. It was just in Ragnarok they cut his long hair. Two things happened when Ragnarok. He got the haircut and he lost the eye.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny how, like, I mean, it's one of the differences between the Marvel U and the DCU, at least in the movies, is like when you have that moment near the beginning of Infinity War where the Guardians of the Galaxy meet Thor and they've got him unconscious in their ship and they have like a 2-minute conversation just discussing how hot he is. I think that's pretty funny because they're just like, he's some sort of like space pirate angel or something. I don't know. I thought it was funny.
He's really looking kind of haggard now, but yeah, it works. I like it.
Yeah.
Could have sworn he didn't have a beard in that first movie. I must be wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely does.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, I'm excited about how things go forward. And yeah, I like Ant-Man and the Wasp. That was also the last film I saw in theaters. What's the other one I saw? Oh, no, it's not. Because since I got back, I saw Mission Impossible.
Oh, did you? How was it?
It's fun. Like, it's perfectly fine, but I don't buy the hype that it's like one of the greatest action films ever made, blah, blah, blah. I don't even think it's the best Mission Impossible. But it's pretty good. I've seen all of them now except for the second last one. I did not see...
Yeah, I didn't see it either.
I did not see... Is it called Rogue Nation?
That sounds right.
I did not see Rogue Nation. And I'm sure that's pretty good. People say it's solid. I mean, it's definitely become a respectful franchise. It's had its... you know, it was an okay sort of movie. Then the second movie is ridiculous and over the top. I feel like the third movie is where it found its footing. The third movie is a really solid, well-done movie. And it just sort of goes on from there. That all sort of fits that tone.
Is the fourth one Ghost Protocol?
Yes.
Okay.
It goes, Mission Impossible 1, where there's not really anybody except Tom Cruise. Mission Impossible 2, which is the John Woo one, of course.
Right.
Mission Impossible 3 is where they bring in some regulars to there. Like, that's Simon Pegg's first entry. That's when he enters the series.
Right.
What's his name? Philip Seymour Hoffman is the villain in that one. Yeah. I'll tell you though, so you didn't see Fallout yet? This Mission Impossible?
No, I need to.
It's good and it's worth seeing, but I was actually disappointed with the way the story unfolds. I'm not going to spoil anything. I'll just say, like, there's some characters in there, like Henry Cavill, like he's obviously a very important character in this. I was disappointed with what winds up sort of happening and unfolding with his character. Like, it's not what I was expecting, and I didn't like how it wound up going at all. But I mean, he's pretty cool and all, and I mean, yeah, there's some great stunts and some nice action scenes and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's one of the few times where the hype it's one of the only times where the hype for something that I'm not usually interested drove me into the theater, because it's like, okay, let's see it. And it's definitely good, but I don't put it above, like, my favorite one is Ghost Protocol, probably.
Yeah, I love Ghost Protocol. I was really, like, not even into those type movies.
No, me neither.
Until I saw that, and I was like, wow, this is really good.
Yeah.
So it kind of, like, I think revamped the franchise, because, I mean, I know I saw 1 and 2 in the theater, and I didn't really like 1 that much, to tell you the truth. But I did not like 2. The only one I've
seen in the theater besides this one was Ghost Protocol. I never saw any of the first 3 in the theater.
But
it's funny though. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say I was looking forward to it. I need to I was trying to watch that Rogue Nation one first, but I may not have
Yeah.
time. I need to go ahead and.
I mean, I definitely want to see it now. I mean, why not? The only one I haven't seen.
It's not one like you have to see before you see the new one, though. Not like it.
No.
Something happened that they're like standalone films, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they have recurring characters, but you don't really need to know what happened in this one or that one. One thing I'll give this new Mission Impossible is like, unlike a lot of these sort of style films, there's like no preamble. You just jump straight into it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It just goes. It's kind of funny though. The agelessness of Tom Cruise is actually becoming kind of problematic because you see him and Simon Pegg and Ving Rhames together, and they look so old and haggard, and he looks more or less the same. It's just kind of weird, especially Ving Rhames. Ving Rhames, man.
Yeah. I mean, it happens.
But I mean, Simon Pegg was A well until recently. You know, he looks. I mean, it's not important or anything like that. And then I'm interested in his next movie. Did you see the preview for his next movie? The comedy horror movie he's doing?
I don't think so.
Oh, he's doing some comedy horror movie finally, like you know, Shaun of the Dead or whatever.
Right.
And his friend Nick Frost is going to be in it too. It's
cool.
What the fuck's it called? It has a weird title, but it's like weird. It's like a British private school off in like somewhere. And then there's like a fracking operation nearby that opens up like some sort of portal for like demons and monsters.
Right.
Anyway, it looks pretty cool. There's a preview out for it, and I thought it looked pretty good. So that would be cool to see him sort of return to that kind of stuff.
This is not shit, I can't think of the director's name. Not the guy who did Shaun of the Dead. The director.
Yeah, I think it is.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's like all the same people that had done like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and stuff.
Yeah.
It's all those same people.
Why can I not think of his name? The Cornetto trilogy or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Edgar Wright.
Yeah. That's right. It must be him. I didn't for sure see that, but I thought for sure it was him. I'll have to double check. Anyway, I can't even remember the name of the movie. It has a weird title that I cannot, for the life of me, think of.
Yeah, I mean, he did Baby Driver, and I think we both like Baby Driver.
Love Baby Driver. Loved it. That's probably the best action movie I've seen in the last few years.
It's good.
With apologies to Mission Impossible, which was fine, but no, Baby Driver is definitely my favorite action movie the last like 4 or 5 years. Probably my favorite action movie I've seen since the Raid sequel.
Those are good.
Yeah.
I would say we need to cover those on here, but it's really an action movie is really not a whole lot to.
Yeah, well, like we said, it might be possible to do like a show where we talk about maybe a group of them, you know, of like kung fu or martial arts type things, you know, for some different stuff. But anyway, yeah, we wanted to ease in, and it's been so long. For those that forgot, this is the final episode. This is not the way we wanted to do it, of course, for the series. This is the final episode of our series that we started, I think, back in like April or whatever, of the Masters of Film. It was not in the plan to do a big break, you know, and to keep it going. But this will be the last one, and then we'll move on to other stuff. So this is late spring from Japanese filmmaker Yasujiro Ozu, who I've often ranted and raved about, because in the last 7 or 8 years when I discovered him, I just love him so much. And he's one of like the big 3 Japanese filmmakers, the other 2 being Akira Kurosawa and Kenji Mizoguchi, who's kind of the forgotten one, Mizoguchi, but he's the guy that did Ugetsu, or Ujetsu, or however you want to say it. But Ozu stands out from the other 2 in that the other 2 were more about what was sort of popular about Japanese films throughout most of the 20th century, which was a lot of like that period piece stuff. Particularly Crispin Mills, particularly Kurosawa with his style of like sweeping epics, costume dramas. It's funny because Ozu's almost like the antithesis of that.
Right.
It's so different. So there's a lot to say about things, and it's one of the reasons why I didn't want to jump in. I want to overwhelm myself because there's quite a lot, and we don't want to, not every single thing has to be touched about, but we tried to talk a little bit about each of these filmmakers that we've done. Let's just go over them in the list. Well, of course, we did do Kurosawa in this series. We also did Alfred Hitchcock and Federico Fellini from Italy, and we did
The
oh
Hour of the Wolf.
oh yeah, Ingmar Bergman from Sweden. And Stanley Kubrick, of course, we did. And now I can't remember the French director's name, but
Truffaut.
Francois Truffaut, right, and stuff. So we tried to give a little background, talk about them, but when we were making this out, even though maybe it seemed redundant to have more than one Japanese filmmaker, I just couldn't choose. I had to get Ozu in there too, and I love Ozu. And for those who aren't familiar with him, some surface remarks are like that he's kind of exactly what the casual moviegoer of today would not go for. He has all the red flags because obviously his films are older. He lived from 1903 to 1963, and then he had a very actually long career. He started in the 20s. First, he went from being a teacher. Then he got through a friend of a friend or a relative or something. He broke into the film industry by being an assistant cameraman. Then became an assistant director, and then by 1927 he was a director of film. So he actually did direct films in the silent era. So he really spanned some eras there, and then directed all the way up into his death. He was only about 60 years old when he died. But anyway, so you've got black and white subtitled movies, and also, unlike a Kurosawa, they are not like sweeping epics. They are not fantastical. They're really about ordinary, everyday, contemporary life in Japan, usually focusing sort of on the family dynamic. In fact, that was a whole genre in Japan called shomengeki, which was basically about focusing on everyday people and their lives. And that's also because the studio that he came up with and he never left. He had the job with the studio his whole career up until his death. It got taken over by a guy that had basically saw that because of the way Japanese society was structured, in the 20s going to the 30s and stuff, the main people that went to the theater to see movies in Japan were mostly housewives, because they would go while the men were at work. So it became sort of prerogative to churn out movies that would appeal to female audiences, which is sort of where some of this domestic stuff came from. And at the time, Ozu himself, his movies were more sort of geared towards that. In fact, his earlier movies before the late period, which is what this movie's from, in fact, it's the first movie is late period, which is his most famous period. Before that, his movies they had more comedic things going on in them. And they were kind of like the equivalent of like a rom-coms of today. And that was really because the studio did have an agenda to cater to mostly female audiences. But anyway, so as we said, since he was prolific and spans some eras, Late Spring came out in 1949, and it really was the first movie of his last period, which is easily the period he's most known for. Tokyo Story comes from there, which is usually the one film people can name by him if they've heard of him. It's one of the most famous, and at least in the world of film scholars and critics and stuff, it's a darling. It's even sometimes been at the top of best films of all time lists, but it's usually at least always on them. Like when they do the British Film Institute list and all those, or the Sight and Sound one, it's always consistently been on that list, moving up and down. I think it's been as high as 2 or 3 before. And I did watch that one today too, Tokyo Story. I'm not really sure why I picked Late Spring. Also, maybe because I own it. That helps. Didn't have to track down something. Here's Late Spring, the Criterion edition on Blu-ray, which is nice to have.
And so those 3 are the Noriko trilogy?
Yeah, so that would be Late Spring, Early Summer, and the Tokyo Story, which is sort of an unofficial trilogy, as we said, because the actress involved, Setsuko Hara, she plays a character named Noriko in all 3 of them. That's another thing. Like a lot of directors and well-known directors, he also had Ozu had a sort of a stable of actors that he liked and would use over and over again. She was one of them, and also the other star of this film, Shizu Ryu. He's in several of his movies too, including both of them are both in Tokyo Story. She plays the Noriko in Tokyo Story, and he plays the patriarch, the grandfather in that. Or in this, he's the father. I kind of got off my train of thought there.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. It was me. But I'm just trying to think about Late Spring. This is 1949. This is post-war era Japan, which is another reason that I've always sort of liked Ozu, is because, any people that have watched me on other shows, you know, I'm Orc would call me a weeboo and stuff because I'm an otaku, an anime person. But I mean, I'm not just surface. I mean, because that's sort of like, yeah, that's the Japan like the world hears about, you know, anime and video games and manga and stuff. And I mean, that's all a very big part of Japan. But there's more to Japan. There's a real Japan under it. And I'm a big fan of that too. And that's one of the reasons I like Ozu, is because Ozu shows you real Japan in some of the more interesting periods, like the post-war period.
It's hilarious to me, the subject matter in this film. The description on IMDb, it sounds like a Lifetime movie. Like Noriko is 27 years old, still living with her widowed father. Everybody tries to talk her into marrying, but she wants to stay at home caring for her father. Doesn't it?
Yeah. And what's funny about that is, like, and one of the things that makes Ozu so amazing as a filmmaker, really, is that all that stuff, like you said, sounds like Lifetime, and what's sort of the lifeblood of melodrama. And yet none of his dramas fall into melodrama. They all completely skirt it. It's a kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that you really notice about Tokyo Story, especially. Because a lot of it has to do with what he chooses to show you and what he doesn't. And this is weird because people have often heard me complain and bitch about, and yes, it's annoying, like when, say, important events happen off screen. That bothers me. But not with Ozu. In fact, that's like a trademark of his style, is that often some pivotal moments don't actually happen on screen, and you only find out about them through dialogue as the characters talk about it. So one of the big things that's happening in this movie is, of course, that, spoilers, Noriko does eventually wind up getting married to somebody that they set her up with. He does not appear in the movie, ever.
Yeah. I kept thinking I was missing it.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, what? Like, we don't even see the marriage or anything. We just see, like, the before.
We see the before. And I mean, I get it. It's just to keep the focus where it belongs, which is on Noriko and her father. You know, we're not supposed to see her go out and talk to this man and get wooed by him. That's not really that's not the story he's telling. The story is the in-between that, which is what happens with her and the father. And it's really interesting. And it's kind of the same thing with, like, Tokyo Story, where, like, when their trip isn't shown, the funeral isn't shown. Well, some of the funeral's shown, but I mean, a lot of it isn't and stuff like that. So a lot of his style is just sort of to have things happen, but not show them, and then just have the characters reveal through dialogue that it did happen. And it's weird. It can be sort of jarring because at first you're like, okay, I missed something, but no, he just doesn't decide to show it, which is really interesting. But it does work to one of his strengths why it doesn't slip into melodrama. Again, I don't need to go back to Tokyo Story, but like so many movies, if they're trying to make you feel for a family, which is really what's supposed to be going on in Tokyo Story, they would show you so many more sentimental moments, and he does not. It's it's kind of funny, like 90% of the time when I find myself watching a movie like that I really, really like, that I think is like a really good, you know, like I've just seen a great movie type thing, usually I can tell about 20 minutes in, you know? I'm just like, wow, I'm watching a really good movie. This is awesome. This is great. It doesn't work that way with me with Ozu. With Ozu, I can just sort of watch it and be like, yeah, okay. And I'm engaged, but it doesn't mean anything to me. And then we get to the final 10 minutes, and then everything just sort of clicks into place, and it just sort of all overwhelms me with how fucking good it is, and how I've just been sucked into this thing, and now I have all these emotional responses to everything, especially with the Tokyo Story. Because again, you see scenes of this family, and they just seem so kind of boring. Like, the family's having dialogue with each other, but they're not trying to show us that they're especially close family. If anything, they're showing us that they've kind of drifted apart from each other, and now basically they're just sort of formal with each other, but they just have a kind of a bunch of sort of not very important or interesting conversations. And yet by the time you get to the end and you have the death of the mother, you really feel for the family all of a sudden. I think it's because it feels more real, because I think in real, like most of us, like, I like my family. I have a good relationship with my family. I don't have like a broken family. There's not like fights or things going on in my family. We're pretty well done. But we're, even at our best, we're not like a hallmark family. Like, that's not our life. Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't think that exists though. I think it's like,
no, but they show that all the time in movies, right?
Sure.
It's really important. A lot of filmmakers in doing that is like going out of their way to show us how great this family is, what the great moments they have with each other, how much they love each other. And that's what I like about the Ozu films, is that like he just shows them kind of as they are. They're ordinary. And yet for some reason that makes, when something bad happens, like a death happens, it feels all the more real and devastating to me. Honestly, there's not like a single scene of like the mother like getting all weepy or like hugging or saying, "I love you kids so much." There's none of that. They're basically just sort of like almost passing around like a football, which is really what's going on in Tokyo Story. Is like the parent, their grown children really have no time for them anymore, and just sort of keep moving them on and stuff. And you get some conversations about how like the parents are a little bit disappointed about that, but they're not really. They're still kind of upbeat. They're like, "Oh well, what can you expect? That's kind of how life goes." And yet, for whatever reason, like when she dies, it just seems all the more devastating and awful, even though they weren't close. I don't. That's the best way I can explain it. I can't really put it into better words than that. But I just think he just has that really deft skill, and some of it's just the stuff he doesn't show or doesn't include. Whereas, like most filmmakers, be like, "Well, there's your beat right there. Here, big family moment or whatever. Here's your thing. Here's your hook. Here's your emotional cue to make the audience, see what a great family are and how much, and he doesn't do any of that. And yet it still all works. So I think that's really cool. And there, of course, there's some of that too in Late Spring, although it's a much condensed family in that it's just a father-daughter relationship and kind of an odd one, which is sort of the point.
Yeah, it is. I think the most interesting thing for me was the period when it was taking place, like just right after, World War II was over and, filled, the Allied forces were still there, basically, controlling everything they do. So
yeah, the film itself was subject to a lot of censorship on this. And if you look into it, some of the censorship, it seems kind of nonsensical and just mean. Like there's some weird stuff in there that like the Americans like clamped down on the Japanese about just because they didn't understand certain things. For instance, like how even today, like Japan, it's a big deal to honor your older family members and your ancestors and to pay tribute to them and to remember them and stuff like that. This sort of kind of baffled and confused Americans and made them uncomfortable to the point that they labeled it ancestor worship and banned the Japanese from doing it or showing it in their art. In fact, in this movie, there was supposed to be a scene when the two visit Kyoto together. The pretext was supposed to be they were going to visit the mother's grave, and they cut it because they wouldn't allow it because they saw that as ancestor worship, even though obviously in America people visit people's graves. So,
I don't even understand the concern there, but
well, the concern was actually it was because they really felt like Japan needed to be westernized. They needed They needed certain values changed and made more like in the West, which is why they would deal with something like that. Which is why a lot of the artists at the time were told to just like make like sort of new stuff looking forward. They didn't want anything that had anything to do with the past. Or like don't glorify the past and stuff like that. And there were, of course, and this wasn't all just. I mean, the idea came from the American forces and this stuff, but there were plenty of Japanese that actually kind of felt the same way and they went along with it. They're like, yes, we lost the war. We need a new start here and stuff. And I don't want to go on a huge tangent because that would take us forever. But obviously, anybody seeing this can understand. At least, I mean, we can't understand really, but you can understand the concept of how it must be to be to be of the age where you lived through that war and your country lost. And so you were witness to the crazy sweeping changes that happened in that country over your lifetime. Like, it's not something we can really fathom.
Right.
We as anybody gets older, we see how things change. I can think about, I remember how when I was a kid, this was different, but that's nothing compared to the way it was for these people who had lived through the war and then saw these dramatic changes. Even stuff that didn't have to do with the American occupation, like how Japan basically, to whip itself into shape for the war, Japan was basically technologically behind other countries. They were not a part of the Industrial Revolution in the late 19th century that, a lot of the Western European places and obviously Canada and the US were part of. Japan did not have like mechanization in factories and stuff. So they had to like really start doing that in the lead up to the war. And in doing so, it vastly changed the country in lots of ways, like people's jobs and their skill sets. They went from basically an agricultural society into a mechanized one in a really fast period. And also saw it kind of blow up in their faces. Not it was their fault or anything, but I mean, they lost the war. They had two atomic.
No pun intended.
Yeah, they had 2 atomic bombs dropped on them. I think that would hamper any country's development. and stuff. But then that's another thing that's interesting about the post-war period is you sort of see the spirit of these people picking themselves up and moving on. It's really inspiring and something to behold. But yeah, getting back to like this film and stuff like that. So, and some of the censorship stuff that Ozu dealt with his movies directly in that period was like they almost couldn't even reference the war at all. Like one part of this was they're supposed to talk about sort of the devastation of some of these bombed out communities and how some things were ruins. That all had to be cut.
Right.
In Tokyo Story, the only thing they can say is that the son who died in the war. That's all they can say about it.
It's not like the bomb didn't happen. I mean, or the bombs.
Yeah. So right.
It's
but that's the way they were made to depict it. Like they were supposed to act like that they hadn't been bombed, or this hadn't happened or that hadn't happened and stuff. There's supposed to be just a reference, not even to any sort of thing that was right or wrong or however you want to see it or controversial, but they wouldn't even let them reference the Japanese Navy in this movie. They completely changed the somebody's backstory of some sort of like profession or something just so that they wouldn't mention the Navy. So yeah, there's some really interesting censorship going on. Again, some of it seems sort of nonsensical. Sort of the big one that was going on here though was this idea, of course, is the marriage that she winds up having is technically an arranged marriage, which is something that doesn't set well with the West. We used to have them, but by the time World War II came around, we didn't really have them. And the big concern was that she wasn't making the choice as an individual. She was making the choice like within a group. Like the idea was, you'll get married, it's better for as a group. And that was something that really made the censors uncomfortable because they wanted to, place more importance on the individual, and thought that Japan had sort of a dangerous streak of, I don't know what you want to call it, collectivism or something like that going on, where it had more to do with that. I mean, Japan was never communist and never even became close to being communist, but I don't know. Maybe there was some of that going on.
Her arranged marriage in the film is a slippery slope. You never know what's going to happen. If people watch that, they may go back to the old times before that.
Yeah, I don't know. But of course, marriage is one of the major themes of this. Not just marriage in general, but also like the idea of sort of the older idea, tradition, and the newer idea of marriage and stuff. And we're not going to get too bogged down in there. It's an interesting movie for somebody like me because I'm not going to get into my own views and hang-ups because nobody cares anyway. But I'll just say I'm a person who personally doesn't really believe in marriage. I mean, I guess it's fine for other people and stuff. It's certainly not something I would see myself entering into for a whole bunch of reasons and stuff. But it's interesting to see she's got this friend Aya who's actually been divorced, which is the weird part. So he has this friend who did get married and divorced her husband because she didn't like him. It's clear like she does not like him, and yet all she ever says to her is, "Get married, just get married.
You'll love it.
Hurry up, get married. It's great." And you're thinking, why? You had a marriage and it completely failed, and she's like, "I can't wait to get married again." Yeah, but Noriko herself she's a really complex character and kind of an enigma. She's hard to figure out. So you have this 27-year-old unmarried woman, which is, somewhat of an anomaly at that time in Japan. And that's where the title Late Spring comes from, because she's already in her late spring. It's not long before she's not marriageable anymore. It's kind of still the same way in a lot of Asian countries, although not quite as bad. I'm speaking from this experience of dating some Asian girls. But 27, wow, that's tough.
You should already have at least 2 babies by then.
Yeah. So she's but she's not just unmarried, but she's also unemployed. So she just lives with her father, and she's content to not have a career either. So she completely relies on him financially and stuff. And she seems completely fulfilled by this. And this is where it gets a little odd, because she just seems happy with taking care, what she thinks of as taking care of her father. I think there's an undercurrent there that he doesn't really need to be taken care of, and he just sort of lets her think that she is doing something useful. Like, obviously she helps him, but it's not like he's just gonna, but she acts like he's gonna fucking die if she goes.
Well,
he's 56 years old, and she thinks he's like 85 or something, right? He's 56, he's like, what will you do without me? You'll die, you'll waste away.
He did have a tough time peeling that apple.
Yeah.
We can both agree with that. Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, the Noriko trilogy it's her that character is unmarried in all 3 films, right?
Yeah, but they're still pretty different characters. And in the Tokyo Story version, that Noriko, she was married. She's the one whose husband died.
Oh, okay.
So she's unmarried now, but she
She's
had been
widowed.
married. Yeah, she's the daughter-in-law. Yeah, so what's going on in Tokyo Story, just a little footnote, is like, so while the main thing is that like the parents feel like their kids don't have much time for them and isn't very nice to them, she's the one of the group that is nice to them, and she's not even related to them. She was married to their son, who had died 8 years previously, which I always think is sort of an interesting thing even now, like what it would be like to be in that sort of position, to marry somebody, not have any children with them, or not get the chance to anyway. They die, and then but you're still sort of part of their family. Like, is there a big obligation to, like, they were your in-laws, but are they now? He's gone and dead. Like, but
I would think with the emphasis on family in Japan, it probably is more so there.
yeah. And not to keep switching over to other movies because we're not supposed to be talking about this one, but it is kind of interesting because like the parents themselves, like the father even says to her, because she says, sometimes I feel bad because I don't even think of him all the time. He's like, I'd be happy if you forgot him. And he said, you know what, I want you to maybe marry again and move on with your life and be happy, which is a pretty nice thing for him to say. But yeah, so that's that Noriko. But this Noriko, the Noriko of Late Spring, is sort of a confusing character because she has some interesting views that seem to, I don't know how they sort of are in harmony with each other. Like one, like she thinks it's just fine to live with her father and she's not interested in marriage. On the one hand, you could say that's sort of progressive. She doesn't need a man, but then you realize actually it has nothing to do with being progressive.
Right.
She has a man, and the man is her father.
Right.
On the other hand, when she meets her father's colleague who had remarried, she has a very strange, old-fashioned view of that, where she tells him that she thinks it's completely indecent for him to get married again, if not repulsive.
Yeah.
What's funny is like he's so amused by it, he's not even insulted, which is kind of funny. They just sort of laugh at her because she's saying how like indecent he is of doing this.
I mean, I can kind of understand that perspective as a child. Neither one of my parents have died, but I can understand being really jealous of whoever comes in.
Sure, but the difference here is like this isn't somebody. I mean, yeah, that's the father perspective, but she's upset about her father's friend, who she's not related to, right? So it's not like it's replacing her mother or anything like that. Like this is a friend of her father. She's gotten remarried, and that bothers her too. Like she doesn't like that. Of course, by the time the movie ends, she's okay with it. She has met the wife, and she thinks it's okay. So I mean, she does go through some changes in the movie, but kind of not the predictable ones. Which is cool, which is one of the things that makes the movie interesting. Because the movie is not exactly about how she just finds a man and that fixes everything. The movie does sort of end on that note, but it's not for those reasons, really, in a way. It's more about just sort of, I mean, it's kind of, and maybe that's one of the reasons why the husband or the man she's going to marry doesn't appear in the movie. Because it's more like he's a device and not actually important to the substance of him. Because it's more like about she had to learn that it's okay to try to live her own life away from her father. Again, how much of it is her own life? It's like the old, thing we see in so many movies. Oh, all a woman needs is a man, and that'll fix her life, and whatever. The movie's from 1949. People, what do you want? But
I mean, that's exactly what they were saying to her.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah,
there's no beating around the bush there. I mean, his advice to her was be a good wife.
Yeah. Still, he did have some sort of nice things to say about it that I think still resonate today and aren't necessarily antiquated. Actually, I wrote down the quote where he says, getting married isn't happiness. Happiness lies in the forging of a new life together, which I think is sort of a nice sentiment because he's just saying, yeah, okay, it's one thing. And he does point out also that marriage takes work. He said, your mother, she wasn't happy when we first got married. We had to work at it. So at least it does show a somewhat, mature view of marriage, not just like la la la, marriage fixes everything. But I am still kind of baffled by her friend Aya's perspective.
I've heard people
just get married.
Yeah, I've heard people say that about arranged marriages before. Like they didn't even know the person, but they grew to love them over time or whatever.
Yeah, and many people thought that was a more practical way of doing it. And I can't argue with that, and it seemed to work for generations for a lot of people.
It's still big in a lot of countries in the world,
Mm-hmm. And like, if I'm gonna get again one of my hangups with marriage, I mean, all those people that didn't get married that way and think, you know, they got married, they were free to marry whoever they want. I mean, sure, okay, but I mean, the odds of you actually finding the one, if you believe in such a thing, like it's pretty much fucking impossible. You found somebody that's compatible with you and that's gonna work, and you've developed strong feelings for them. I don't know. I don't want to be too cynical and say I don't believe in true love. Sure, I do. I guess. I don't know. I don't want to upset people. But, your marriage is just a sham. You're living a lie. No, I'm not. I'm not trying to say that to married people. Like I said, I don't believe in marriage for myself. For other people, it's fine.
Well, that's what I was going to touch on about the trilogy,
sure.
And you know the character in particular, because you know Ozu himself never married.
No.
So that's what I was kind of thinking. Maybe he was trying to put part of himself into that character.
But part of himself was definitely in the character because he lived with his mother till she died.
Oh, is that right?
Okay. Yeah. In fact, just like kind of anybody that wasn't known for like dating back in those days, there's a lot of speculation that he was homosexual. But it's also been confirmed that even if he was, he definitely did actually frequent prostitutes, like female prostitutes. So either he did that out of frustration, or to throw people off, or to try to make himself normal if he was one of those, homosexuals.
I think that's
victims. Again, this is back in the early. This is the first half of the 20th century, people, right? So
that's still a thing, though. Like if you're not married by a certain age, people start to talk, that may be the case.
Yeah. Apparently, he did write what was not. Which I've never seen the contents of the letter, but he got kicked out of a school he went to for writing what at least the staff considered to be a love letter to another boy. Now, whether or not he actually said anything lovey-dovey gushy or not, maybe he just said some nice things, and they just thought, that's not the way a boy should talk to another boy, and they thought it was a love letter. But that did happen to him. So
I love the way your hair smells.
Yeah, like maybe he said that. I don't know. I don't know the content of the letter, but that did happen. So yeah, there'd been some speculation there about whether or not he'd been homosexual, but he didn't seem like the type that was personally interested in marriage at any point. So yeah, maybe there is some of that in the Nordico character. And as we said, he lived with his mother, so yeah.
And he died of cancer too. That sucks.
Yeah, he did not have he was very productive, but he didn't die. I mean, he only lived to be about 60.
It's like a lot of these guys we talked about in this Masters series die young.
Yeah, working themselves to death.
I guess 60 is not too young.
Yeah, it's not too young, but it's youngish. Well, like, I mean, Kubrick had a fairly long life, but
very productive life.
Yep. Yeah, these are the masters, and they were productive. And Ozu is certainly interesting. I said, directing his own films from the silent era right up to about the end of the 50s. I think his very last film was in color. That was just when the color era started. He's also, not to go off on a tangent, but he's also one of the filmmakers who's like, movies I just could not picture in color. Like, they just seem so great the way they are. Like, some movies I'm like, yeah, color might help them and stuff, but I don't even know why, but I just love the black and white look that his movies have. Mm. So I know we're just sort of jumping all around. We're going from themes to style to presentation, and that's fine. I don't think anybody cares that much. So now I'll just talk about stylistically. Okay, so stylistically, once we got into this period, his late period, put this movie on, all his movies had the same thing, and that is he was definitely a minimalist when it came to his shooting. But it'd be a mistake to call his movies simple, because they're actually really sophisticated, especially in some of the filming techniques. And yet, so the main thing you'll notice, anybody, you don't have to be really a film buff or anything, notice that, is that his camera is stationary. His camera does not move. His camera might move once per movie, and sometimes less than that. And I like it. It works for what he's doing. He's not doing an action movie.
Right.
He's doing dramas about people and stuff. Anytime action or anything fast happens, he doesn't film it. It's off screen. So, he's mostly filming people moving around slowly and having conversations and stuff. And I appreciate it because it's something that's gotten kind of lost in film today. And Jay and I've already talked about it when we talked about some other older movies. We talked about it when we did the Kubrick film, Barry Lyndon and such. It's nice, the style that he uses, in that he'll frame a scene and have the camera sit there, and then he just lets his actors act. It's kind of nice, actually, because I don't know. as we said, we talked about how much the camera moves now in quick cuts. It's not like he doesn't do cuts. Like, he'll have the camera sit and watch it, but sometimes he'll cut. There's a good scene in this where two characters talking, and it goes boom, 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 back and forth between each one of them. It doesn't shows them talking together at a distance, but when it's close up, it goes from dialogue of one speaking on one, dialogue of the other one speaking on them, and goes back and forth 3 times. So he does move it in that sense, but he doesn't actually move the camera. He just switches the shot. But anyway, I was going to say, it's just sort of nice and refreshing to see actors just act. Because, I mean, to this day, actors act. But part of me thinks it must be kind of frustrating sometimes with the way films are filmed and edited. Because, okay, I don't have much experience as an actor, but I do know from doing a little, like, the theater class and stuff like that, if anytime you're going to shoot a scene, usually one of the first things you do is you figure out the blocking, which is, you know, physically where the people are going to be in the scene. And I assume they still do that, even in modern movies. But it has to be kind of weird now to make a modern movie where it's like, okay, today we're going to block out the scene, and then we're going to do it, blah, blah, blah. And then you see the finished movie, and it's all, like, edited to shit, where it's like, what was the blocking for? Like, you can't tell where anybody is or what's happening. Everything, you know. So part of me wonders if, like, actors just accept that or if they feel frustrated by it and stuff, because now, like, I think, like, the main blocking we see isn't really blocking. It's more like setting up things that are more action-y, like, if they're like choreography, right? Like, it's a fight scene or a chase or something. But actual blocking, like, where the actors are going to be and how they move around, like, maybe they do that, but so much of it suffers with the way they edit the movie down. So anyway, in Ozu's films, you get to sort of see that pure. It's left alone. You see the blocking. You see wherever he is. Also, he's known for keeping the camera low in household scenes, and that's just for obvious reasons because of the Japanese tradition of often sitting on the floor. So there's a lot of low shots of the characters sitting upright. But he usually does give you the actor's full body, which is nice. I don't like it when they just sort of shoot people from the waist up and stuff. That kind of pisses me off when films do that. And films of all eras have done that. But he usually gives you a nice frame. So, yeah, so that's one of the main things you can take away from his style is that, and sometimes deep focus, not too much of the deep focus, which is more about, like it says, you have your stuff in the foreground, which is the focus, but sometimes things happen in the background. He does a bit of that too, which, again, is not really considered important now, but you have to remember that in the 30s going into the 40s, it was almost sort of a new revolutionary technique. Movies didn't have that for the most part. It didn't even really become sort of a normal thing until maybe the 50s. But I don't want to go too much there and stuff. But and Ozu, of course, is kind of known for exactly the stuff I said, which is even back in the day, before his movies became old, the idea that a lot of people, like foreign audiences, would not like or respect them, that his movies were too Japanese. And I kind of get that, but to me, that's part of the appeal, of course. For somebody like me, that is the appeal. And actually, out of all of his movies, which mostly avoid a lot of that stuff, probably Late Spring has the most Japanese traditional stuff going on in here. It opens with like a tea ceremony. They go to see a No play. Remember back when we did Throne of Blood and we talked about how some of it was inspired by No? Well, people wanted to know what No looks like. There's a No scene in this, which, for those wondering, is a sort of Japanese theater style from, I think, from around the Renaissance area. And
this is before Kabuki, right?
Yeah, it'd be before Kabuki. It's less narrative than something like Kabuki. The main thing is, like, it's called theater, but it's less about telling a narrative story. It's more just like what we saw was a perfect example. It's more like a mixture of music, poetry, and dance. And that's basically what you see in the performance they go to see, which is kind of cool, kind of neat to see.
Yeah, totally. That's what's so cool about seeing it. Filmed so long ago, and hell, this is still the 40s.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
It's really interesting to me to see the culture.
Yeah. Speaking of which, getting back to the stuff about the censorship and stuff like that, it's pretty interesting. One of my favorite scenes doesn't have much to do with the plot at all. It's near the beginning where she meets her friend and they go for a bike ride to the beach. And they give us this nice long lingering shot of the Coca-Cola sign. So that lets you know right off about sort of how things have changed in Japan. And also, the sign before that is in English and talks about how the bridge they're going to cross can only have so much tonnage, well, obviously that it's in English and it doesn't have much bearing to two Japanese on bikes, but it means, yeah, there's big, heavy American military vehicles that would be crossing that bridge, so it's important. So it's not exactly subtle, but it's a somewhat subtle way of just sort of showing you, yeah, this is the Japan we live in now with this going on. So that's kind of neat. I wonder if that was sort of his way of like getting something in because he was frustrated with the stuff that was censored. I don't know. Sometimes you can read too much into stuff. And there's a scene, obviously, later that we're going to talk about that is the epitome of that. But we won't get there just yet. But, I'm just looking at some of my notes here. So I was trying to think. So, yeah, just sort of getting back to the main story. It's about how her father is very concerned with how attached she is to this life of just sort of living with him and not doing much and stuff, and he wants her to live her own life. So we find out there's a twist at the end, kind of. So one of the reasons, like, that sort of gets things moving is like after she tells him how annoyed she is with his friend about the idea of getting remarried, he says, "Well, actually, I'm thinking about getting remarried," which really upsets her, and he says,
"Oh yeah," she freaks out.
Yeah, there's some woman in this neighborhood, and he's thinking she'd be nice and she'd be good to remarry, and she really freaks out. And it does sort of get things rolling, and she's all upset anyway, and this is one of the reasons why I think she does decide to give in and meet with the guy they tried to set her up with. Earlier, like I said, when she's riding bikes with that guy, the joke sort of was like, he asks, "Oh, you like him?" "Yeah, I like him a lot." She's like, "What do you think? Do you think he'd be a good husband?" She's like, "Yeah, I think he'd be a really good husband." And she's like, "Oh, really?" And then you find, she's like, "Well, yeah, he's engaged to somebody else," and stuff like that. So that's the other thing I thought was kind of interesting too. So she has this idea. It seems conflicting to me. So at the time, at least when the movie starts, she says that the idea of a man getting remarried is distasteful to her.
Right.
It's almost obscene. And yet, it doesn't seem, and I'm not saying it should, but I'm just saying with that line of thinking, you think she might think it would be improper for her to go riding bikes and hanging out with this guy who's engaged. But she's completely modern and open about that. I just thought those two ideas or views should have been at odds with each other and stuff. But anyway, but she seems perfectly fine with hanging out with him. Again, I'm not saying that it isn't. Of course it is, but I don't know. She almost seemed like she would have like a more old-fashioned view, but she doesn't when it comes to that, hanging out with a guy that's engaged. So I thought that was interesting. But what was I saying before that? Oh yeah, so yeah, the idea of finally relenting to meet this guy. I do have a joke for why the guy that she eventually married doesn't actually appear on screen. Want to hear the joke?
Sure.
It's because they couldn't actually find any Japanese actors that in any way resembled Gary Cooper. Because there's several times in the movie where they're talking about him.
Was it more than once that they say it? Okay.
More than once. Several characters bring this up, that he looks like Gary Cooper, the American actor Gary Cooper and stuff. So maybe they were just like, we don't have anybody who looks like that. Okay, we just won't show him.
Yeah, I saw that was one of the things they had originally taken out with the censorship, but they realized that it was
more or less positive. Yeah, they were saying he was a handsome guy, so they put it back in. Yeah,
handsome white American guy.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's my joke theory for why he doesn't actually appear on screen. They couldn't find anybody that looked like that.
I don't even know what Gary Cooper looks like.
He looked kind of like a lot of the guys looked back then, sort of bland and white bread. All those guys sort of blend together in my mind, really. Gary Cooper, I don't know. To me, he didn't have any distinguishing features.
British guy?
No, he's American. I'm pretty sure he's American.
That's the wrong one.
He was in, I think he was in the movie about Lou Gehrig. In fact, I think they reference that. They say the baseball movie.
Yeah, he does look generic to me.
Yeah, he's just sort of a generic guy, but I mean, it's the 40s. I don't know. Different idea. So anyway, as things move forward, we get, it all sort of comes down to the trip to Kyoto, which is sort of like their last trip together before they both go to get married and stuff. And again, as they said, they cut out anything about her visiting her mother's grave and stuff like that. So when they're in Kyoto, And again, they're supposed to be talking about ruins and stuff, but that's cut out. I'm trying to remember what the hell they do in Kyoto.
I like the train scenes.
Oh yeah, those are cool.
Yeah, it was really nice to see.
Another good example of sort of the industrialization of Japan. Because again, it doesn't mean much to you, I guess, out of context of knowing. But I just mean if you had lived in Japan, you would see, oh, look how much the country's changed. Cause,
Sure.
we didn't have that, 15 years ago or like that, and now trains go all over the place. And of course, Japan is still known for trains, it's bullet trains and stuff like that.
Seeing it now is really crazy.
Yeah,
Tokyo especially.
Yeah. And they do talk a little about Tokyo in this, but obviously Tokyo Story does it more. But yeah. So while it's in Kyoto, that she meets her father's friend again, and that's where she actually meets the wife, and she changes her stance and decides, okay, there's nothing really wrong with him getting remarried. She's very nice, blah blah. And then So I'm sure we can circle back and there's other stuff to talk about. But as I was saying, when people talk about like scenes that can be analyzed and stuff like that, so I think you know what I'm going to ask you. Here's one of the most analyzed scenes in cinema, the vase scene. So basically, to give people an idea of what happens, they're at the end of that day and they're talking, and they've gone back to their hotel room, and they're both sleeping on their futons side by side in the hotel room. And she's saying about how she's changed her mind on that, how she now that she's met the woman, she's actually very nice, and she's saying that. And then when she turns to look at her father, she sees that he's fallen asleep. Mm-hmm. So then she just sort of smiles to herself and looks up at the ceiling. Then there's a shot of the vase in the room, which is off to the side near the window. I think there's a moonlight. I think the moon's there. And the vase in the window. It holds on it for 6 seconds. Then it comes back, and her expression has changed. Now she's looking sort of more wistful and almost sad and thoughtful. And then it cuts back to the vase and holds for 10 seconds. And then it leaves. And people have wondered and written and speculated. Do you think it means anything? What do you think the significance of the vase scene is? What is your interpretation?
Man, I don't have any idea what it means. I did think it was odd, and obviously there's something there. Maybe she's come to the realization that she's going to have to, move on.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has something to do with her emotions,
right,
and definitely has something to do with like her. She's coming to terms with something, or deciding something, or something like that, or I don't know. But then, is the vase itself that important? I don't know if it really is, but there's certainly been people out there that think it is.
What are some theories?
There's some interesting theories, even just on the Wikipedia page, which is crazy big. There's some stuff here, and you'd be interested how in depth they go. We're just like, okay, that's way too much. Well, I'm just trying to scroll down to where the hell it is. It's funny, like as we said, there's a lot to talk about. If you were to look this up on Wikipedia, the article is vast. It goes all over the friggin' place. There's all sorts of stuff going on. Anyway, so the vase scene here. So basically, somebody wrote an essay called "The Riddle of the Vase: Ozu Yasuhiro's Late Spring." Anyway, so there's some different ideas here. Emotional power. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, one commentator: the vase represents stasis, and thus an expression of something unified, permanent, transcendent. Another critic describes the vase and other Ozu still lifes as containers for our emotions. Another specifically disputes their interpretation, saying the vase is a non-narrative element wedged into the action, which is kind of where I lean. That's kind of what I think it is. Another person says it's the filmmaker's deliberate use of false point of view, which is true because Noriko's not actually looking at the vase; she's looking straight up.
Right.
And there's another thing. Then somebody says that the vase is a classic feminine symbol. Then there's just something saying that the vase is simply a symbol of the traditional Japanese culture. And there's probably more than that, but that's what's on the page there. So there's all sorts of stuff about the vase. I'm kind of like what you said and what the fourth guy said there, is where I don't think the vase itself is important. It doesn't matter if it's not a vase. It could be anything. It's just sort of showing her one way, and then when we come back to her, a change has happened. That's kind of what I get at. Mm-hmm. We see her, she's starting to feel something. We come away, we come back, and now she's different than she was before. Something has clicked, something has changed, something has evolved, whatever. And then it just goes back to the vase for the hell of it because it's artistic and nice, I guess.
I mean, that makes sense. You know, I mean, it's not like he intended it to be like some phallic symbol or something. That,
yeah, well, they're saying it's reverse, right? Like it's some sort of feminine symbol.
I don't understand. I guess because it's
or the vase is a container for our emotions. Like again, I think that's reading way too deep.
It's a container for her virginity.
Yeah, that's true.
You could.
Of course, that is something to think about, but of course the movie couldn't go there. But I mean, obviously she'd be a virgin, and now she's on the eve of, not being one anymore, and that would be significant, but the movie can't really get into it. But that is another thing to consider, that she and her father are on the precipice of something. And of course, how the movie ends is she gets married. We get a scene of him seeing her together. And she looks very pretty. It's funny because she looks very plain throughout the movie, really. But when she's done up in her wedding dress, traditional Japanese dress, I think she looks very attractive. And they have their last talk. And then, of course, she takes a car and goes off to the wedding. And that's when we cut out. Because we don't see the wedding because that's not important. And then we cut to after the wedding where he goes down to a bar and he meets her friend, the divorcee, and they have a chat. And that's where he reveals that the whole thing about him getting remarried, he just lied. He made that up. It was to help push her out the door. It was help to motivate her and get her to do that. And the movie's left ambiguous of whether he'll ever actually tell her that or not. Although, I mean, I guess she's going to notice if he doesn't get married. But here's another one of those lines of dialogue that I don't understand. And her friend does it again. Her friend is so confusing to me. Her friend has the most bizarre views of marriage I've ever seen in the movie. Out of everybody, she has the weirdest things. So she's been married. She got divorced. She hated being married. But she can't wait to get married again. And she tells her, oh, just get married. All I have to do is get married. Can't wait to get married. And also, now at the end of the movie, when she's talking to the father, and she's saying, so you were going to get remarried? And he said, oh, yeah, I told her that I was going to get remarried. She says, you shouldn't. Don't do that. She actually tells him that he shouldn't do it. Why? Like, he's not going to, as we find out. But I don't understand. Why is she opposed to that? She's all for remarriage. She's been divorced. She tells her, and she even says to her, she goes, because because Noriko even points out, and you're the one who's been divorced. She's like, well, that's how it goes. Get married. If you don't like it, you can divorce him. She's like making it seem like it's no big deal. And yet now she's telling the father, who wasn't divorced, he's a widower, she's saying, you shouldn't get married. I'm really confused by Aya. I don't understand her points of view at all. I have to say. I have
reverse psychology.
Yeah, I have no idea why she wouldn't want him to get married. But that's what she says right at the end. She says, well, you shouldn't get married. And then he just says, well, actually, I'm not going to. It was just a trick, blah, blah, blah. But it's just like, why did you not want him to get married? I don't know. It's kind of weird.
The more I think about it, the idea of not showing the marriage or the wedding is, and it goes against like everything that we're accustomed to.
Yeah.
Like it's like leaving out the climactic point, the climactic scene or the big scene at the end.
And yet I really like it because I think it helps us reflect on the two characters. Like I said, we're not distracted by this guy. They talk about him, but we never actually see him. Because, I think in a lot of movies, obviously, because you have that scene, the first scene where after she's met him, and you find out that she liked him. At first, you're kind of feeling cheated and weirded out. You're like, but as the movie goes on, and by the time it's over, you understand why it's not there. Because, well, yes, he is a big part of the movie, but he's not in that. We don't need to see him, which is kind of interesting. I like that, and that's something Ozu does in pretty much all the movies of that period. Late spring, early spring, late summer, Tokyo Story, and such. Like he'd often leave out like what would seem like important events, and yet they seem to have more meaning when we see the characters just talk about them afterwards, which is really deft and interesting because, as you said, like it seems to go against all the rules in instincts of movies. If there's one universal rule of movies, it's show don't tell.
Right.
And yet Ozu flies in the face of this and does something really extraordinary, I think, which is interesting. Which shows that, like, he does show by telling.
Right.
We're going to start twisting words around and stuff. Like, it can be done. It's not easy, but it can be done. And he doesn't really.
It doesn't do any of the showing. It's if anyone else made this movie, I feel like in any country they would have some big extravagant wedding at the end, to cap it all off.
Yeah.
But that's not the point, you know, of the
Right.
film.
Because they're supposed to hammer home, look how happy she is now and stuff. But it's like, no, we're not going to see her after the fact. We're going to go back to the father, and we're going to sort of see like and it is a great ending scene because the whole point is through the movie he's been pushing her away because he wants her to have her own life, even though it's within the context of get married and be somebody's wife. But still, I guess for 1949, not too bad. The important thing is he knows that she's not living a life to the fullest by hanging out with him. So throughout the whole movie, he's trying to push her out, and now we have that end scene where we do get to see how sad he is about it. He sits down and
he was doing it for her, not for himself.
Yeah, exactly.
He really is going to miss having her around.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells what is that, his sister? He tells her that he'll have to learn how to deal with it or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you feel so bad for that actor again in the end of Tokyo Story too, because it's a very similar thing in Tokyo Story. Of course, he's the grandfather in that, because the pivotal moment in that is the grandmother dies, and that movie ends with him having to learn how to get along by himself, and he's a much older man. He's lost his wife, whereas this guy's already lost his wife, and now he's losing his daughter wife, if you want to call it like that. Now, we're not going to get into it, I don't think, because there's not much point. But obviously, there are some people that can interpret the movie as like saying, "Oh, maybe there's." Even though like nothing is shown, like there's something off. Like maybe there's nothing actually happening, but maybe the Noriko does have like incestuous thoughts for him. I don't really get that. I think that's just sort of a lost in translation type thing through cultures. But yeah. I can understand why Western audiences could view it through that lens. Because I mean, even now, the whole parents with the kids thing is a big deal in Asian countries, which is your parents take care of you when you're young, you take care of them when they're old. Which does not really happen as much here. I mean, we try, but it's really not the same, and it's not universally understood. I remember my Chinese girlfriend was so deeply impressed by how devoted my mother was to her mother in her older age. My grandmother, of course, having Alzheimer's and stuff like that. And I guess that's because she was used to seeing like not much of that over here and stuff. And I was like, well, it was kind of extenuating circumstances, but yes, my mother was certainly dedicated to her mother and stuff, which I was always impressed by too, because I don't know, whenever my mother, we're gonna get personal and stuff, but whenever my mother talks about my grandmother, like from when she was growing up, she was afraid of her. She did not really love her. She was afraid of my grandmother. My mother was the youngest in the family of 4, but by a huge gap. She was a total accident. Her dad was 40 when she was born. And she was basically treated as an afterthought growing up. All her siblings were much older. And by the time she was born, her grandmother she was kind of over, my grandmother, I mean, was kind of over and done with the whole raising kids thing. But she had to do it with my mom. So, yeah. So my mom just sort of like lived in fear of my grandmother for most of her life. And yet when it came down to it, my grandmother had Alzheimer's and stuff like that. My mom was easily the one who was the most involved in her life and the taking care of her and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's tough. But as far as the incestuous stuff goes, I didn't really get that vibe at all.
No, I don't.
It was. I really think she has some psychological problems tied up to her mother's death, probably, and that's why she's so attached to her father.
I think so too. I think that she thought maybe that's what she could do for her mother. Is like, my mother would want me to take care of father. I'm sort of like taking over for her type thing.
Well, I mean, someone has to do it. I mean, generally, a man. I mean, the statistics even now, for a man, gets widowed or gets divorced, will get remarried, much faster than a woman would. Basically, to fill that role in his life, like you go from mother to wife, essentially. As far as someone to take care of you, that's the way a lot of people look at it. I mean, it's kind of a old way of looking at things, and older.
I think so. And like, especially with his character, because his character is 56 years old, which he says is near the end of his life. Because I mean, I guess the 40s people didn't live as long, but still 56 is not necessarily near the end of your life. And he wasn't even retired. He was still working for us, So she makes it sound like he's like some old doddering fool that can't tie his shoes. And if she leaves, he's dead. He's actually a completely capable, functional adult who still works, and he's more capable and functional than her in many ways, and that she's been unemployed her whole friggin' life.
Right.
But again, some of that just has to do with the time period and stuff, so there's no point in criticizing or dissecting it too much.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that it's probably common for women to not have like jobs then, right? Still? I mean,
Well, that was the era when women started having to get jobs because a whole bunch of young men had died during the war, and they were and her generation would have been the part of the generation to fill the void. Actually, she has a conversation with her friend about it, the one who's the stenographer, because she says something like, "Oh, is it hard?" And she's like, "If it was hard, do you think I could do it?" Because it was like, yeah. So actually, that right after the war, or during and after the war, was sort of like when the first generation of women really, in great numbers, joined the workforce, and that was sort of to fill the void of so many of the men that had died. Actually, that's something that is sort of kind of a theme in Early Spring, which I like so much, which I'll just say is about an office worker having an affair with a coworker. As I think one of the things they're trying to point out is like women and men together in the workforce was still kind of a new thing at the time, and this is sort of like how it was a byproduct and stuff. So that's kind of interesting.
okay, yeah. So it was kind of odd for her not to have a job and not be married either.
Yeah, yeah, the double whammy, because it'd be like, okay, if she's married, okay, she's probably a housewife. But if she's
Right.
not married,
Right.
she should probably have a job. So yeah,
Okay.
Noriko is definitely sort of out of place in this world now. Is what I think is going on, because yeah, many of the women her age would have been joining the workforce or have already joined the workforce. Yeah, because they said something about like during the war, her being part of some sort of forced labor thing. That was one of the things that changed. It used to be have something to do with being something to do with the Navy, and they cut it out because they're like no military references. But so yeah, I mean, obviously with the themes and the titles of Ozu's various dramas in this period, a lot of it has to do with like spring, autumns. He's talking about life sort of in cycles. So yeah, as far as the cycle of her life goes, it sounds kind of sad, but I mean, it was the way contemporary audience would see it. Again, it sort of is her late spring. She's kind of she's approaching 30. She's getting to the edge of being a marriageable woman and stuff. So really, the father has to kick into high drive here. So Ozu was often talking about the life cycle and stuff, and I don't know, just sort of the changes and stuff that people go through. And as we said, I think that's really what they're trying to hammer home in the vase scene is like it's kind of like it's been leading up to it, but it's in that moment that she makes the change. Like she looks at, we see the vase, we come back to her now. She's different now. Something has changed. But I wish I'd seen Early Summer. It's the one that kind of gets the most. It's the one that follows this directly and gets replaced and gets compared to it the most and stuff. Because both of them, I guess, have various things to say about marriage. Whereas, of course, Tokyo Story is about family and more about generations. This does both. This is marriage and generations. The relationship between the generations is something Ozu likes to talk about. Which, again, because of stuff like World War II, makes it very interesting. You have the older generation that kind of had to sit back and watch their world explode around them. They weren't involved in the war. And the younger generation that was either like a kid and helpless during it, or maybe a younger 20, 30, 40 something that had to be directly involved in it in some capacity and stuff. And just the way they both experienced such a huge event, and the way they had to move forward from it. You still do wonder about how happy both of them are at the end of the movie. The whole point was he was trying to move her out so that she'd be happy, but we don't really get to see anything about her marriage life, and she'd been so resistant to marriage for so long. Are we really supposed to believe that suddenly she's going to really like it? I don't know. And he's sad, but he's sad in a wistful way because he's hopeful that, because as he said, this is no way to live your life, stuck at home with me. And he talks, and it's interesting. They both talk about how they were selfish. He apologizes to her, saying, "I was selfish. I kept held on to you too long." And then during the movie, she apologized to him, saying, I was selfish." Which, in a way, kind of makes sense because what she was saying was, "I wanted to hang on to my familiar, comfortable life. Like I'm too afraid to go into the unknown and try to change." Which is really what you're supposed to do, like in your 20s and stuff. And she was hiding from it, I guess. So yeah, I could see how you could say that that's being selfish.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other angle on that is the tradition versus modernism type thing too, because it seems like what we're doing is she has sort of a somewhat modern, within the context, a somewhat modern view, and yet tradition is just closing in all around her, saying, you're supposed to move on and get married and stuff. And it seems like she's sacrificed a part of herself to go on with tradition. So I mean, I guess that's one of the things I like about the movie is you can talk about it from all these angles. It's not saying one definitive thing. It's not saying marriage fixes everything, and it's not saying the opposite really either. It's just sort of letting you decide, on your own, sort of what you think was best for these characters and how they're going to feel moving forward with these changes. Because Noriko had a certain amount of freedom with her father that she's not going to have going forward because she has to be a dutiful wife. Because as we see, yeah, she takes care of her father, but it's in a comfortable, normal sort of setting. And again, it's not like he's some sort of taskmaster making her do this, that, and everything. She enjoys it. She really enjoys it. And also, she could sort of run errands and come and go as she pleases. She's not really going to have that freedom as a married woman. So she's sacrificing sort of a bit of freedom too going forward, even though the idea is supposed to be, it's a new sort of exciting opportunity. But again, it's 1949 and she's going to be a housewife, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it really going to be that different? Isn't she just going to be doing the same stuff she did for her dad, but now for a husband?
Exactly. That's what I was saying earlier. Yeah. It's just the exact same thing.
So is it really that exciting and stuff? No. What's interesting is they never bring up children. They never talk about maybe she could, get pregnant and have children. That's not discussed, which is weird because usually that, if people are talking about marriage, that usually follows that question. Oh, you're getting married. Do you want to have kids? Are you interested in having kids? That's sort of the thing that follows marriage, whether or not you want to have children. And that's never actually brought up. There is a scene earlier in the movie where she interacts with a child, but it doesn't seem to really go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they have to repopulate Japan.
That's true. They took quite a hit. So I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, honestly, you can say that in a cynical way, but I'm sure there was a certain amount of pressure on women of her generation to do just that, right?
Yeah.
Saying we just took a huge blow here.
I mean, I think for all the countries involved, I think was kind of that pressure.
Sure, I think so. And on a political level, it led to some, disastrous results. As I said, with Japan, they really did hurry up the mechanization and stuff like that doesn't happen, seamlessly. And, some countries in trying to do those sorts of things had some very terrible results, most notably probably Stalin's various 5-year plans in the Soviet Union, which, led to mass starvations and stuff like that. And the Great Leap Forward in China, which more or less ousted Mao, because that did not work out either. So, yeah, when you try to enforce a lot of progress and change on a country in a short amount of time, it's never seamless. And it affects everybody from top to bottom and stuff. And Japan was very much going through that sort of transition. The post-war period is definitely a transition period. In fact, if you look at the Japan of, say, 1960s, it's almost unrecognizable how much it's changed. It's crazy. That's really the Japan that I like the most in the 20th century, the 60s, because that's when Japan sort of got back on its feet again and started doing stuff. But they had some hard decades afterwards. I mean, that's what happens when you lose a war. But, I mean, they did get a lot of aid. The U.S. gave them a lot of aid and stuff, and that helped out. But that, as I said, that kind of stuff is not apparent right at the time. You have to go a few decades later to see it. So, yeah, maybe the U.S. is already pouring a bunch of aid into Japan in 1949. But if you're living there, you don't see it. And all is the people that beat you in the war, they're still here and now they're imposing rules and stuff on you. So you can understand why post-war Japan was a very somber period, and yet they had to work so hard and stuff. But and yeah, hindsight, we have hindsight, but you don't have hindsight back then. You see those changes.
That's another thing that kind of struck me is odd. In this film, everyone has a smile on their face for most of the film. It's also happy. The music is happy most of the time.
That's in Tokyo Story too, and it's even more noticeable in Tokyo Story because the whole point is in the very first meetings when the parents first arrive and start meeting their kids, everybody is super polite to the point of like formality.
The point of yeah.
And then as the movie moves on, you realize that it's just all sort of for show and it's fake. Like they're just doing it because that's the way they're supposed to do it. But like again, they're actually not really treating their parents very well at all. They're passing around like a football, and they're saying kind of passive aggressive things to their parents and stuff like that, you know. And that just has a lot to do with the politeness of Japanese culture.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of etiquette to be observed. There's a lot of rules to follow, and even in the very worst of times, they followed it. So. Yeah, so I can understand how like it can seem sort of jarring to a foreign audience, but it does make sense if you know how Japanese society worked with its sort of rigid social norms. Yeah, it's funny. It's a kind of a funny quote that like once you got into like the 50s and stuff, his films started to actually get seen by like in international audiences, and he was often really amused by from the interpretations that came in from viewers from other countries. Joking at one point, when Americans don't understand something Japanese, they say it's Zen, which I guess is kind of funny and true. He also has a funny quote I had up at the top here, which says, "Someday I'm sure." It just sort of, I think it's great because it really just sort of gives you a great idea of his personality and the way he viewed his own art, which is, "Someday I'm sure foreigners will understand my films. Then again, no. They will say, like everyone else, that my films aren't much of anything." I think that's funny. He had a sense of humor about himself.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that he seemed to have kind of a drudgery kind of life. He was an alcoholic. In fact, that's how he did a lot of his work. He'd go on like drinking binges, and that's how like he would like write scripts and stuff. This movie stands out as different from other ones in that it actually was based on something. It was based on a novel called like Father and Daughter or something like that.
Yeah, I think that is what it was called.
And I have to wonder, you know, the stuff we talk about him like not showing and cutting out, like, is that in the original? Like, or does the original run that way too?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it talks a lot about a vase.
The vase is key. That's the important part.
And then the vase was there, and I looked at the vase again. Yeah. I'd love to hear some film school talk about what the vase, the meaning is. I guarantee you it wasn't intended to really have any meaning itself. It was just, you know, another shot that's not her face. You know, it's not her reaction shot.
Signifying transition, you know, some sort of change. But people focus on the actual vase,
right?
You know, and I mean they're free to, and who knows, maybe there's some good stuff in there to mine, but mostly it doesn't sound so good. It sounds kind of ridiculous to me.
I mean, does vase sound like symbolic of femininity? I mean,
I don't know. Somebody said it was.
I've never heard that described before. It's not like it's a peach or something, you know?
Yeah. No, the way he would craft narratives just really went against the grain with the idea that he would the way he would like not show certain things, and then other things he would put a lot of emphasis on. Like for instance, we see a quite long sequence of the no performance. Like it doesn't have to be that long, but it is, which I appreciate because it's kind of neat to see. And there is something to the plot going on there, and that they both sort of make eye contact with the woman that he's saying that he's going to remarry. So you do have that. So there is something, you know, that's part of the narrative going on there. But I trailed off there. Sorry, I started reading something.
Yep. The British Film Institute put this at 15 and Tokyo Story at number 3, greatest films of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ozu is another one of those directors that I was aware of for actually a long time before actually seeing anything of his. I wound up renting a box set that would include that had his late period. That Late Spring might have been in, but I didn't actually watch it at the time. I don't remember how many movies were in the box set, but I watched 3 of them. And I'd always heard about Tokyo Story because it was always mentioned in lists of best films of all time, and I knew Ozu was the guy that done that. Then when I was watching the box set, I just sort of watched several of the films out of order, and the one that actually really hit on me was Early Spring, which is a later film from the later 50s, one of the last films he did. And I was just enchanted by that movie. And I see why it's not really as good as, say, Late Spring or Tokyo Story, but I just really liked the subject matter and the stuff that showed. Um, um, Usually, I'm not that interested in dramas that are family-centric. Ozu, it's kind of an exception because I think he just does it in sort of a unique and deft way. But anyway, about 2 years ago, I hadn't watched anything by Ozu for a while, and then our video store, which had stood on its legs for so long, our awesome video store, Video Difference, which was such a great place and exposed me to so many great films, including Ozu and film. Finally it was going out of business, so I ran down there to buy some stuff, and I managed to buy Late Spring. And even though I didn't watch it right away, it kind of really put back on my head how interested I was in Ozu. So even when we started the show, before we had any idea of the Masters or anything like that, I knew I wanted to do him at some point because I just find him so unique and interesting and kind of overlooked, really, when you talk about international cinema, in that usually, like, at least in the more casual sense, if you're going to talk about Japanese cinema, oh, well, then that's Kurosawa. And I think he's just worth mentioning because not only is he as good as Kurosawa, but he's as good as Kurosawa in a completely different way. And since I'm a completionist and stuff, I do hope that we will get to talk about the third guy, Kenzie Mizuguchi, because he's kind of the forgotten one of the 3. He was also very good. Ugetsu is a really interesting movie because it's often mentioned as one of the best ghost stories, and yet, like, you watched like the first hour and there's nothing ghosty going on in it at all. It's a movie that really takes a while to get where it's going, but once it does, it's really effective. It has a great sort of shadowy atmosphere. I don't know. I'm not really sure what else to say about the movie because I haven't seen it in a while, but atmosphere is sort of the main thing I get from it. I really enjoyed its atmosphere. I really enjoyed its look. Unlike, say, the movies by Ozu, where the music is just sort of, well, it's there, it fits in, it's nice. I think the music in Ugetsu is really cool because, again, it's haunting and adds to the atmosphere and stuff. So maybe just for the sake of that's a movie we'll do down the road, as we said many times. This is going to finish off our Masters of Film series, but that doesn't mean we'll never do movies by directors like that again, or even some of these same directors. We just wanted to put some together in a group, and I feel bad that I dropped the ball and stretched it out, so it didn't work out to be as tight as we could. But this finishes the Masters of Film series, and then we're going to probably just do some more easy breezy stuff to finish off the summer. And then, we'll go from there to wherever we go. And to you guys watching, we, of course, are open to suggestions. If there's a filmmaker or a particular film or series or something that you're interested in, we always like to hear about it, and there's a good possibility that we would explore it because, I feel bad because, again, 1, it's not our usual night, and 2, we've been off for more than a month, so I don't know if nobody's really watching now, but I hope people will watch because I'm saying we really do want to, kind of start a dialogue with the people that watch. And so I hope we can do some movies that strike some chords with people, and they can give us some impressions and things on stuff. Even if they haven't seen it, maybe if maybe they can say if it's something that sparked their interest or something they want to check out later on down the road or something. Oh God, we hope so. But yeah, we'll wrap up on that in a little while. I'm just trying to think. We can jump onto other topics for a little while. I'm not tired. We can still keep going. Trying to think about anything else I watched during the summer, if anything was interesting. Okay, so there's an ongoing show right now called Sharp Objects that Jay and I have both been watching.
I was gonna get you, they're talking about that in the comments. So.
Oh, really? Okay. So I have not watched the 5th episode yet. It's available to me. I might even watch that tomorrow. Yeah.
It's good.
So I have watched the first 4 episodes. So I know it's all based on a novel. It's not a novel I've read, but I know the author. And based on what I've seen of the show so far, I think it's a novel I would like a lot more than her other novels. Really, it really has my interest. It has a lot of those things I like. There's a killer. I like stuff with killers. There's a small town with obviously secrets. I like that. You know, it has like the main character is sort of a mess of a person who's a reporter, which is something I like and can relate to in a way and stuff. So it has a lot going for it, and it has a really nice style. Another theme I like in just anything is memory. I really like that. Everything, a lot of my favorite stuff touches on memory. A lot of stuff I write, I try to ape that. I try to put in stuff about memory, and this show is doing a really good job of talking and showing memory because it has a lot of flashbacks, but also has a little quick, whatever a mini flashback is. You know, just sort of quick snippets and stuff like.
Yeah, it does a lot of that.
It has a lot of that, and I like it because it's really started to sort of form a picture of this main character, this Camille, or whatever her name is. I think it's Camille.
Camilla?
I don't think it's Camilla. I think it's just Camille. I will double check.
Right. Camilla doesn't sound right, but you're probably right. Jean-Marc Vallée, which
Camille Creeker.
He did the Big Little Lies, I believe, is what it's called.
Okay, I've heard of that.
It's another HBO show that they're actually, I think, filming season 2 now. That's going to come out later this year. Which I really enjoyed that, as well. So you may want to check that out if you get a chance. It's it cleaned up at the Emmys last year, so it was like they all won, like Reese Witherspoon, Nicole Kidman. They all won Oscars. I mean, the Emmys.
I didn't even know Nicole Kidman did any TV, so that's news to me.
Yeah, it's all-star cast. Shailene Woodley from those whatever Divergent films or whatever those are called.
Yeah, I've heard of those.
And
those are a mess, man. Man, they're incoherent.
I haven't seen them, but
don't.
The Laura Dern's also in there. She's
I like Laura Dern. She's sort of had a resurgence lately, hasn't she?
Yes, yeah. She's doing lots of stuff.
And she's in the Star Wars and stuff.
The Twin Peaks came back.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I the visual style of this Sharp Objects is amazing.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It reminds me a bit of the first season of True Detective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does quite a bit, and
it has sort of some of that Southern Gothic. I'm a big fan of Southern Gothic, so it has some of that going on. They're in a place where they're in Missouri, I guess.
Yeah,
Southern Missouri.
They really laid it on thick within the last episode. You saw Closer with the whole Civil War reenactment stuff. Didn't you see that?
No.
You haven't seen Closer yet?
No, that's the 5th episode.
Oh, you haven't seen? Okay, we're on the 6th. That's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Sorry.
Anyway, you'll see what I'm talking about.
I said the 5th is available. I can watch it soon. It's there for me, but I haven't watched it yet. So yeah, I've watched the first 4, but okay, that's interesting.
5th and 6th, I think, should be available now. But I think it's getting better as it builds up with every episode, I think.
Yeah.
The music is a bit much at some parts.
I'm really annoyed by like some of the music, especially her taste in music. I mean, I get it. I feel like sometimes when they do shows and movies, they feel like they need to go out of our way to show us that the characters have cool taste in music. So it's always like stuff you've never heard of and stuff. That just sort of bothers me.
Well, none of that was in the novel at all. It's all Vallée. It's him and his personal taste. So, but it really focuses on it because not only does Camille play music all the time, and so does her stepdad.
Mm-hmm.
Always like screwing around with his record player that he's obsessed with.
I said it wasn't until the 4th episode that he finally played something I like. He was playing "Riders on the Storm" by The Doors, and I think it was the first song in the entire thing that I heard, whether it was on the radio or a jukebox or wherever it was, that I actually kind of liked.
I mean, I like that song, but it's like the same thing with all the Led Zeppelin. Like I love Led Zeppelin, but it's just so played out. I've heard all that stuff so many times. It's almost like cliche.
I guess so. And to that point, maybe it's true that it's good that the show is avoiding just doing a bunch of really well-known popular songs. But at the same time, I don't know. I felt so dragged out by the music. By the time I heard the Riders on the Storm, I felt refreshed. I was like, oh, finally.
It's all over the place. I mean, it'll be like electronic, like dance music, and then like Tupac was in one of the episodes.
I don't know. She's always playing this weird, really crappy R&B stuff that I can't stand.
It's all over. It's like blues stuff, and then it'll be some
a lot of blues and R&B, which I understand because again, it reflects the area they're in and stuff. I'm not saying it's out of place. I just don't like it because it's always showing her like in her crappy car with her broken phone, putting on her playlist, and I'm just like, what shit are you gonna put on now? Like, I can't stand her taste in music. But anyway,
well, I don't even know if it's her taste because that wasn't her iPod or whatever that thing is, or that wasn't her. That was her, roommate in the.
The one who died, the one who drank the bleach, which is wow.
So I think she's kind of using that as a way to remember her or whatever. I was just saying,
I watched the first few episodes with my mother, and I'm glad I did, just because I had somebody to watch them with. Because I'll tell you, okay, her little sister,
right?
Who she doesn't really have a relationship with now, because whatever, the little hellion and stuff. Whenever she's not at home wearing her like good girl clothes, I can't recognize her.
Yeah.
So often when she's out in the town, like dressed normal, having scenes, my mother has to tell me that's her. Because I was totally confused. I was like, who is this girl that she's interacting and talking with? Oh, so you actually feel that way? Because I'm just a person who's bad with faces.
I was the same way for like the first two episodes. I didn't know it was the same person.
Yeah, like when there's this part like early on where she meets her downtown near one of the memorial of the dead girl and stuff, and I had no idea that was her. I was just like, I just thought it was just some random girl she was talking to.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, every time she's not dressed up in her good girl clothes that her mommy dresses her in, I can't recognize her. I've gotten a little better at it, but yeah, the first like 2 or 3 episodes, like I could never spot her. But yeah, now that I've watched like the 4th episode, I have a good feel for the characters and who they are and their relationships. I mean, with a lot of shows like that, it just takes a little while to sort out who's who and things like that, and who's what they are to each other. I was pretty interested in that. One of the things that happens in the 4th episode that I thought was interesting is the little girlfriend of the guy whose sister was the second victim. There's a part where like she's trying to give him a hand job, and he's just all freaked out, so he leaves. But then it shows her like scrubbing her hands like rigorously afterwards and stuff, like as if she's like completely disgusted by it.
Well, I think that's going to be a little bit of spoilers here, guys, if you haven't seen the show. But she finds the blood stain under the bed.
Right.
She cleans that up with bleach, and I think that's when she's scrubbing her hands. Is after that.
Okay. I misread that. I thought it was showing that she was actually kind of secretly disgusted by him. So
It very well may be. I think she's only with him for attention.
Yeah. Anyway, that's one of the funny things about like you said, tying it into the thing with Noriko is that Western audiences love to look for incest when it isn't there. And that's one thing. Like, remember, like everybody in the town thinks like he's so upset about his sister being brutally murdered.
Yeah.
There must be something wrong there. Yeah, I think there's some incest was going. Like, what is wrong with people? If my sister was brutally murdered, I would be totally fucking upset too. Mm-hmm. It would be nice to think that people wouldn't think that. Would think that she and I were up to something funny.
They're like, he's being a pussy by crying at her funeral,
Yeah.
Like,
it's a mean.
Isn't that what people do, though? Yeah. I mean,
it's a mean little town, which is one of the things that makes it interesting, right? Everybody's like super mean to each other.
I mean, the funeral is the place to do that, type of thing. But they're like, he's boo-hooing all over town, and he's obviously guilty.
Yeah. I could not deal. If I was her, I could not deal with her mother.
Oh hell no! She is.
Yeah, I'd be like her mother, like saying, "I can't have you coming around here and stirring things up." I'm like, I didn't stir anything up. Right. Somebody else murdered these people. That's who you should be upset with. The fucking murderer. Meanwhile, I'm a reporter doing my job. And you're getting all in my face saying, we don't have you upset. So obviously there's some more stuff in the past there that's going to be revealed why her mother just fucking hates her.
Yeah, it gets worse. But
her mother favored the other one who died and then just despised her. I mean, obviously I know. It's clear she got up to some bad shit out in the woods. That's clear from some little flashbacks that she was a little bit of a wild. After her sister died, she went a little wild and did some nasty things out in the woods with the boys. That's clear. But there must be deeper reasons why her mother hates her so much.
I mean, I feel like a lot of that's kind of on her. Like, why don't you just stay in a hotel? Why the
Oh
fuck are
yeah,
you staying in that horror,
yeah.
house of
You don't
horrors?
have to subject yourself to it.
I
It's
mean,
not like
that's
she went there trying to repair her relationship. Like it's one thing she's like, okay, I'm gonna try, but she's not. So
but
why? Yeah, exactly. Why put yourself there? Are you that fucking cheap?
I mean, I'm sure that the
The paper wants you to do this story. They put you up in a
right.
crappy
That's what
little
I'm saying.
motel. Yeah,
Yeah, that's. I kind of feel like she brought that on herself. I mean, why?
she
I mean,
didn't
of
do
all
that.
places to
It
go,
just
that'd be the last place you would want to
But
go.
I would have snapped on the mother. Like she's
Yeah.
obviously, gone through all this and she's too tired to anymore. So I understand it. But it's me as watching it. All I want to do is like scream at the mother.
But I mean, she stays hydrated though. She drinks so much of the Avion water that she's really staying hydrated.
Haha.
Oh man,
it's
she
it's.
drinks
I
nonstop.
know
It's
it's such.
nuts.
It is kind of a cliche, right? That
It
she drinks
it's
so
yeah.
much. But I mean, I get it. I mean, I'd be fine with like she's damaged. Okay, she doesn't have to be such a lush. But whatever. I mean, that plays well with
Well,
audiences. I guess is
I,
what they expect.
I mean, we established like in the first 5 minutes that she's an alcoholic. Do we have to keep showing it?
Yeah. Just like, I mean, as much as I think so far it's unfolding nicely and it's a well told story, there are still some stupid things in it that are predictable. Like, I know she's going to fuck that cop. Obviously, you knew that from the second they laid eyes on each other. I'm like, here's the cop. He's like an outsider in the town. Okay, they're going to fuck. And it's going to be passionless and dirty. You know, that's definitely going to happen. They're going to have like sex, but it's going to be gross and uncomfortable and there'll be no emotional connection. You can just call that.
Oh, well, yeah.
Actually, I already did see. I mean, I called that before I saw it, but I did. Yeah, I did see the start of that. And it shows exactly how fucked up she is, right? He goes to kiss her, and she stops him, and then puts his hand down her pants. She's like, "Oh, you're that kind of girl." That would be a huge red flag to me, but whatever.
Well, yeah, sure, it'd be a red flag, but
He's taking what he can get. I get it.
exactly.
But yeah, I will just say the elephant in the room that I haven't brought up, and Jay and I have an ongoing dialogue about it, is that I don't like her for the role. She's doing fine. Like, she's putting effort into it. It just seems, as I've said, like, there's just easier things to do. Why do we have to pull teeth and make her do this? I don't know. She's one of those actresses I can't reconcile, no matter how much they try to make her tough. All I can see is what she was in Enchanted and in the Muppet movie, where she's just smiling and sugary sweet and happy and bouncy. I mean, she was literally cast as the physical embodiment of a Disney princess, and that's all I can see. And now I just feel like she's a good actress and she's doing well. So it's not really that. It's about like the person that she is. Like I just feel like why didn't you just pick any of the billions of other actresses that don't have that built-in sweetness? But anyway, she's doing fine.
Yeah, that's what Jacob McCullum was talking about. He said he likes Amy Adams in the role, but he knows that you don't. And,
I just wanted to clarify. I don't think she's doing it poorly, and I think she has the chops. I just feel like it's a silly choice when you could have just gone like with somebody that have more natural ability and more natural looks. Is sort of how I feel.
I always think that it's better to go with an unknown or more unknown. Because it's easier for me to accept them in that role.
I guess I don't know. I mean, in True Detective, you had two pretty big stars.
Yeah, that's true.
And they played the roles really well. Where I didn't really have to think about Matthew McConaughey too much because he sunk into that role and stuff. So I don't know. Plus, I don't think for me, Amy Adams is not like some super A-list person.
Well, I mean, she is. I mean, as far as actresses go, she's probably like just under like Scarlett Johansson and Jennifer Lawrence.
I guess so. I mean, yeah, she's in some big movies, but she's never the focal point for me. I mean, even in that movie that I really liked, Arrival, she was probably like the worst thing about it, and she was.
That's what I was going to say.
She's the main character. I
didn't like her in Arrival.
Again, I felt like it was forcing a round peg into a square hole. I was like, why? You don't need to do that. But anyway.
Oh, I picked up Let the Right One In. I'm about to start reading that. So.
I like how it reads. It's a pretty good translation. I mean, it must be.
I hope it is. And then I think there's a sequel. He wrote a sequel to that.
Yeah, he did, and I never ever touched it. Might be interesting. I was at the library the other day where I got Tokyo Story. Here's the library edition
Oh, cool.
of Tokyo Story, but I also got a book, and it's The Artist as Monster, which is a book about the cinema of David Cronenberg. So
yeah, let's do some Cronenberg, man. I love.
Yeah, I'm all for that. So yeah, probably in the very near future we'll do a Cronenberg movie or two because we're both big fans, and why not?
He's like, you know, people love John Carpenter. Do what now?
The typewriter from Naked Lunch, the bug typewriter.
That's cool. I mean, people love John Carpenter, and I do too. I mean, he's my favorite, but like Cronenberg is right there, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They're hand in hand. Like my favorite.
I think Cronenberg probably makes the smarter movies.
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, they're both. But as far as like both being satisfying and entertaining, I'd say they're pretty much even.
Well,
with Carpenter, he's done sort of the more iconic stuff, which is cool.
Very different styles, so it's. But
can you imagine like David Cronenberg doing Halloween?
No, but I'd like to see it. Or like, what was he attached to that I thought was so bizarre?
I don't know.
You know, back in the 90s, it seemed like they were swapping directors left and right. It was just something that you couldn't imagine.
Something that didn't happen.
Right.
I don't know.
But very, very particular. But I mean, I say that, and some of his newer movies don't really reflect that.
A lot of his movies of the last decade have been more straightforward, not as weird.
Shit.
You know, he did a couple kind of straightforward adaptations,
right.
Like when he did A History of Violence, which was a really great movie and a really great adaptation.
His wife passed away last year, I believe.
Yeah, I heard.
So, you haven't seen Maps to the Stars yet, have you?
Nope.
Would you consider doing that on the show at some point?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a good excuse to finally watch it.
I'm interested to see what you say about it, because I really enjoyed it.
One of the most interesting things about Cronenberg is his reputation in Canada. It's very complicated. On one hand, we treat him like he's one of our absolute gems. But on the other hand, we have to remember how badly we treated him for most of his life.
Huh.
So it's kind of interesting, because for a while it was sort of like, because God knows the Film Board of Canada couldn't stand him,
Yeah.
With all his boundary pushing ideas and stuff like that.
I mean, really though, it's tame now, in comparison.
I suppose, but few have done better.
It's not often that you eat a slug and it turns you into like a sex maniac. Even that is kind of odd still. And that was like one of his first.
You need to watch M. Butterfly again.
That's one I couldn't really get into. But
well, it's sort of a departure from his style, and it was more or less a failure, but it still kind of interests me. I'm always interested in the failures.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't bad. It's just not really something I particularly enjoy. Who was the lead in that? Jeremy Irons.
Oh, it's him again? Of course, he's in your favorite, Dead Ringers.
Mm-hmm.
Which I was thinking might be the first one we could do.
Sure.
Crimes for the Future. A new form of sexuality for a new species of man. But
that's a very
body horror.
That's a very thick book. Is it just talking about the films individually?
Yeah, it seems to go from from periods. Really, it's like. Yeah, individually. Stereo, Crimes in the Future, Shivers, Rabid, The Brood, Scanners, Videodrome, Dead Zone, The Fly, Dead Ringers, Naked Lunch, M. Butterfly, Crash, Existence. It ends with Spider in 2002, so.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't have any of the newer stuff.
Yeah, let me know what you think.
But still, that's almost 500 pages. But yeah. But it only occurred to me recently that I should be looking for books on films and stuff. It was something I kind of ignored for a while, and then a few months ago, I bought that Future Noir, that awesome book about Blade Runner and stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, there's all sorts of books like on films and stuff I should look for, and that's what I decided to do when I went to the library, because I wasn't at first going to get any more books out, because I already had 2 out, but I had to take back the movie. You can only keep a movie for a week, so I was getting that and getting Tokyo Story, and then I was just like, oh shit, look at film, and while I was there, I found that, so I was like, cool.
That's cool.
But yeah, we have a really great library now. It's only 2 years old, and it's awesome. It's super modern and cool. It's 5 stories. It's all glass. It's big open. It's big open concept. Everything's open and stuff. Up on the top floor, there's this great just reading room where it's all glass. You can look out. There's a little cafe, although I don't care about anything because it's a bunch of shit I wouldn't eat. But then you actually go out on the roof and stuff on nice days. It's a really great library. Took them a long time to build it, but it's worth it. Because our old library was just really kind of like the opposite. It was just, too small and cramped, and, there wasn't much natural light and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. What's funny is, my life has sort of been defined by some of the libraries I grew up and went to and stuff. Of course, the Sydney library hasn't changed. They're hoping that back in Sydney, they're going to do a new library, kind of like in the mold of this one down the waterfront. But when I went to university, I went to... people might remember a small university, but I got the big university experience because it was part of a large one. The big one in Halifax is Dalhousie. And King's is where I was a student of. But if you're a King's student, unless you're taking a very specific course load, you're pretty much always going to have at least some courses at Dal. And that's how it, of course, was for me. And then in later years, even though I was still technically a King's student, I was only taking Dal courses. But anyway, so King's had a fairly small campus, a very small campus, and to fit that, a small library. But Dal has a massive library called the Killam, and it's this awful, awful, oppressive building. It's about 5 stories, but it's a complete opposite. What's funny is they went for the glass concept too originally, but then they found out that it was letting in too much light, and it was damaging the books. So they did this sort of redo. They couldn't. So the building is actually just encased in stone, or what is that stuff? When the outside of a building is kind of like gravel, where it's like rock, but it's all bumpy.
Not stucco.
Well, yeah, maybe, I don't know, but not artificial like stucco. But anyway, the whole thing is encased in big blocks of that, and it's just an awful, awful place. It has the most oppressive atmosphere, and it's just full of people doing serious work and students killing themselves to get research projects and stuff like that done. But it's dark for a library, for one thing. The one good thing I like about it is that it's quiet. It's a very nice and quiet place. I even had some classes there, that have various little rooms and stuff for you to have classes and stuff. But man, I have so many awful memories of just spending hours wandering around, trying to do research for papers and stuff like that, and trying to get stuff to print off on the printers, and just an awful, awful time. So it's really nice, this downtown Halifax library, because it's open and bright and colored and fun. It's the opposite of the Killam. It's nice. The only problem with that is it's not quiet, and there's a kids floor, and they often have activities and stuff for kids, which is good, reading programs and stuff. But if they're noisy, it kind of reverberates throughout the whole place. So it's not you can really find a quiet spot to read. There's always some sound, but still, it's a really great building, and I've certainly enjoyed going there recently. And so I said, I kind of only just remembered what a great resource it is for movies, because the aforementioned video store, Video Difference, when they went out of business, they donated a lot of their movies to the library, so still get some there.
Yeah, that's nice. Speaking of libraries and books, I started that Fahrenheit 451 movie, the new one.
Yeah, it's
on HBO. I haven't finished it yet, but
it's fine, but it's kind of flat.
It's very out there. It's really futuristic, but they keep a lot of the terms from the book.
Yeah,
that I remember, calling yourself salamanders and shit all the time. It's just kind of weird.
It seems like maybe it was a bit rushed or something. I don't know. It feels like it's missing something. It just seems flat to me. There's some good stuff about it, and it's okay, but it's not a good representation of the book, really. It's more just kind of an interesting offshoot of the book. It's fine, Michael B. Jordan, he's okay, and Michael Sheen is always very intense and stuff, but I don't know. something about it is off to me. I was pretty underwhelmed. But it's a pretty short watch. It's like an hour and 20 minutes or something.
Yeah.
So easy enough to do. But yeah, speaking of which, hopefully this gets me in the mood. I watched 2 movies today, so not just stuff we do for the show, but I just haven't really been watching movies much lately. So hopefully this gets me going again. As I said, I think some of the heat has been putting me off and stuff, and I've just been fidgeting and doing other things. But you know, I love movies. Want to get back. So
Yeah, I really haven't watched a whole lot. Not as much as usual. I've been playing a lot of. I finally beat Far Cry Primal last night. So.
Oh yeah, I still haven't played the Far Cry games, even though I know I'd like them. I was playing.
Really? Okay.
Playing Yakuza 0. My second playthrough of that. The Yakuza series are a lot of fun. There's just a lot to do. It's kind of like Grand Theft Auto, not quite as free as that. You don't get to drive around. You just walk around. But I mean, there's all sorts of little subquests and places to go and things. So even when you're not doing the main missions, which are very straightforward, it's a beat 'em up basically. You just beat the hell out of people, but it's very enjoyable.
Yeah, I've heard. I know there's quite a few in that franchise.
Yeah, I think they're up to 6 or 7.
Like
I got 0.
Zero, yeah.
But now I need to hold on to my money, and even though there's a few other video games I've seen, I got this I think for like $29.99. There's a few others that I could have gotten, but I'm holding that on because I really want to get the Spider-Man game when it comes out. It's been a long time since I bought a game when it was just brand new, because I usually wait for the price to go down. But I think, assuming I can, I will get the Spider-Man game almost right away, which is expensive, but I want to play it. Because I really love Spider-Man, and I've just been missing that experience. I'm a huge fan of the Batman Arkham games, and this seems like kind of like that, but with Spider-Man. So I'm dying for something like that. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many Spider-Man games over the years.
I know, and this is the first one I've really cared about.
I mean, I've played quite a few, and I mean, everyone's always all about it. They're so great, but it's just shooting a web and going over here, and it just it hasn't.
Like I said, this one I think is going to be way different. It seems a lot like the Arkham series to me. It seems very story based, very with a lot of cool, sequences and stuff and attacks and stuff. I don't know. It looks really cool.
Are the same people that did Arkham? Are they doing it?
No, it's not the same people. I just think it's the same approach.
Oh, okay.
I think they basically looked at the Arkham stories and were like, "Oh yeah, we should do that with Spider-Man."
Hopefully, it'll introduce some of the other villains.
Yeah, I mean, it had some different villains in there, like that we wouldn't expect. Like Mr. Negative's in there, which is pretty cool.
That's cool, yeah.
But I mean, there's like a long trailer for it that shows like at least 6 or 7 of them. There's like Vulture, Rhino, maybe Electro.
I'm sure Doc Ock's in there.
Probably, but almost anybody that was in the Sinister Six at some point, I think, is in there. Hopefully they didn't show everything and they're holding back some. I mean, it's pretty cool. Like, and there's that I can't remember her name, but for a while she was kind of, I don't know, maybe she's still in the comics. But for a few years there was a cop, a female cop with a Japanese name that he was sort of friends with. She's kind of like a big character in this. She seems to like run support for him because in the previews he's like talking to her on like an earpiece and stuff, which is kind of cool. He was always a cool character, kind of a replacement for Jean DeWolf, who was murdered by Sin Eater many years ago. But yeah, since I've been saving money for the stupid mattress, I haven't bought my comics this month. It's driving me nuts, but my comics will just have to wait. Tired of this stupid broken mattress. Yeah. But anyway, we're veering off too much now, I think. But to wrap up, I just want to say I know that Ozu has all these sort of red flags, I guess, for people that like movies and stuff. But I don't know. You should give him a shot. Very powerful, compelling stuff, and he's just such an artist, really. The way he crafts scenes and stuff and tells a story, I think it's really great, and uses a lot of techniques that are still used today. Although I think some of them, as we said, like especially with the quick editing, it'd be nice to get back to maybe framing scenes and sort of letting things sit for a while. You wouldn't think that a director that moves the camera so little could be as dynamic as he is, but he really can be inside. I mean, again, you're not going to really dynamic's not. I'll admit, I'll level with you. Dynamic is not a word that really comes to mind when you think about Ozu, but I just mean within the context of like the stationary camera and stuff like that, you'd be kind of surprised at some of the results. Is more what I mean. Where people go saying dynamic, what the hell are you talking about? But
yeah, I think minimalist is a good way to describe it.
Sure, yeah, exactly. I think that's a good way. You'd be sort of surprised at the results he pulls off using sort of minimalistic techniques is kind of what I mean. It might be a better way of putting it. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, and actually, in the wake of this, there's at least a couple more that I want to watch kind of right away. Early Spring, just because it's the first one I watched and I liked it a lot, and also Late Summer because it's the one that comes between Late Spring and Tokyo Story. This is 49. This is 53, I believe. Late Summer is 51. So probably those two I'll watch sometime in the near future. How did you watch this one? How did you find Late Spring?
It's on YouTube.
Okay, so not great, but works.
Yeah, I mean, it was a decent quality, and
yeah,
the subtitles are actually like YouTube subtitles, so they weren't.
Oh, not ideal.
Yeah. They didn't always work the best. Yeah, but that's the only way I could find it.
Yeah. Oh, and I always want to see Floating Weeds, which came out in '99 because it's rare that you see a director do this where he's remaking his own film. He made like a silent film like 20 some years before called Floating Weeds. And he remade it, yeah, like 25 years later, which is kind of an interesting idea. You don't really get to see directors do that, so that sounds kind of interesting to me. And also, not for any time probably soon, but down the road, as I've said, I only really know him for the period most people know him for, the period that kicks off with Late Spring. I'm interested to see what some of his earlier films are like, because they were quite different. Because the one thing you can say about this period is even though it consists of his best films, they all are very similar. Like they all stand apart with the story and stuff. But I mean, as far as presentation and stuff goes, pretty much exactly the same. You get the exact same presentation each one. It's still enjoyable and they stand apart from each other, but yeah. But yeah, Ozu, yeah, darling of the Sight and Sound pool. Where yeah, their most recent list was 2012, and in that one, Tokyo Story is number 1. But yeah, very interesting figure, and I just thought he was worth pointing out also because he's sort of the forgotten filmmaker, very much overshadowed by somebody like Kurosawa, who had a more obvious impact on the West, particularly like in the adventure and Western genres and stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, if you like Star Wars, well, guess what? You can trace that back to Kurosawa, so you can understand. Whereas Ozu is a much more sort of subtle influence, but he certainly had his mark on the world too. Every once in a while, I bring up Roger Ebert because he's an interesting figure to me, because sometimes I disagree with him so vehemently, and other times he says things so perfectly just the way I want to say them. And Roger Ebert's another guy who was a fan of Ozu, so it's another thing that he and I agree on and stuff. So that's kind of cool. But and just to get in some extra information there too, because his career stretches back so far, a lot of his films from like the 20s and 30s are actually now lost, so you can't go watch them. So I've always been interested in lost films. So he has at least 5 or 6 that are lost, including his very first directed film, which is called Sword of something, I can't remember. That came out in 1927, which was actually some sort of historical epic and stuff. But he kind of disavowed the film right away because he felt like by the time the studio had edited it and stuff, it wasn't really the thing he'd set out to make. But clearly later in his career, as he gained influence, he was able to have more control and make the films the way he wanted to. So, yeah, so that wraps up Late Spring, and it also wraps up the Masters of Film. We hope you guys enjoyed taking a trip down and checking out some of this international directors and stuff. And as I'll say for the last time, yes, we'll probably do some more of those guys in the future. But as far as the series goes, just to expose it, do a different one each episode. We did that. So this is a return to things, hopefully business as usual. I hope you can pencil us in for next week and we can get some momentum going here after our, again, unplanned summer hiatus. Jay and I have knocked around some ideas, and like we said, we're thinking about definitely doing some Cronenberg and stuff, and maybe some different approach, maybe doing an episode that focuses on, instead of one movie, several movies, if there's something like martial arts or something like that. Might be an interesting idea. So lots of possibilities for the future, but yeah, hopefully the main thing we're going to get in our future is some more consistency going forward. It does feel really good to be back. I really enjoyed this. I was a little worried about Rust, but it seems to have worked out well. So glad about that. So anything to add, Jay?
No, sounds good. Yeah. We'll see you next week.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll see you soon. Peace out.
Thanks.